Good evening. Do you believe in ghosts?
It's alive. It's alive. It's alive. It's alive. It's alive. In the name of God.
Maybe there's something supernatural about all this, guys.
I don't know. I just feel like we're in some kind of danger and we've got to do something.
I don't like this place. It's depressing. There's something evil about the house.
In the dark of the night, something strange is going on.
You see that movie, Night of the Living Dead? Sure. They ship those bodies east.
Well, say hello. The dead have risen from the grave.
Mister, there's 100 of those things out there.
How many did you say?
100?
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Sleazoids, the podcast where we go down the rabbit hole of 20th century genre fare from the most influential canon classics to the trashiest exploitation films we can get our hands on and invite you to tag along in helping us create a canon of sleaze. Each week is a double feature Grindhouse style where we discuss two films loosely related by subject, genre, actor, filmmaker, or franchise, and at the end of each episode along with our honorary Sleazoids, which you can become by subscribing on Patreon.
Next week, we are talking vampires, but, like cool vampires with sunglasses and leather jackets and all that. So join the sleaze.
Correct. We decide on all the official ratings and rankings of every film that we cover as well. Patreon subscribers also get an on-air shout out and 2 bonus episodes every single month, which we have been doing for, 6 years, coming up on the 7th year.
Yeah.
It's like 170 plus bonus episodes, as well as our bonus transmission series where we talk about new release genre movies throughout the year, which we have 50 plus of at this point. So if you haven't made the jump yet, patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast. We recommend doing that. And speaking of which, we had a lot of people make the jump this week. So we're going to give them their shout outs real quick here, and I actually have to go through these pretty fast because there's too many of you. We had Thomas Witters sign up at the annual tier to get a little bit of a discounted rate per month if you sign up at the annual tier. So thanks to Thomas for doing that. Signing up at the $5 tier, we had Punches2104, we had Max, we had Alex Jason, we had Louis Molyneux, Cabe Creviston, Alleged Beef, Gregory Littman Navarro, Chimera, Pablo Patel, George Mitchens, Seth Pye, Mike Wave, who signed up for an entire year of the show, I believe maybe even at the $10 a month tier for an entire year, which means he's going to be joining us for the monthly virtual screenings, which we try to do on the last Thursday of any given month. And guess what, guys? We haven't decided what it is yet. But this month, it is Halloween night, is the last Thursday of the month. So Jamie and I are going to be watching something with you on Halloween night.
Oh, we're going to have to dress up
for this month. It's going to be a big one. Yeah, we got to have a big stream. It's going to be big. We had Dylan Payne sign up. We had Aya Sinclair. We had Xavier Sotil. We had Andreas de Santiago. We had John Eden sign up for an entire year of the show. We had M. We had Inturo Bang, Ava, Rachel C., Adam, Bruno P., Scrimmy Scrim, R. Lee, Sing Lee, Butts Raffle, James Davidson, John Tower, Ackerman, and last but not least, David Seamus. So thanks so much to all of you folks. Hope you are enjoying those bonus episodes. We appreciate that support.
Yeah, thank you very much.
That's the one plug for the week. The other plug, as always, is Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you're listening on either one of those platforms, and I can see the stats, I can see you right now listening on both those platforms, give us a good old rating and review over there. It helps us climb the ranks and find new listeners. And the very last plug, as always, is merch. If you like the poster art that Bay City of Toronto horror artist Trevor Henderson did for our show, you can get that put on basically anything that you guys can think of. And you freaks thought of a lot of stuff. You have bought notebooks, you have bought pillows, you have bought coffee mugs, hoodies. If you're interested in that, the link is in the description of this episode, as well as over at sleazoidspodcast.com, as always. But that is it for the intro. Welcome back to another week. As always, I am your host, Josh Lewis, and joining me also, as always, is my co-host,
Jamie Miller. Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome. I believe 2 weeks ago would have been the last time you folks over on the main feed would have heard from us, where Jamie and I would have just gotten back from the Toronto International Film Festival, where we got invited as members of the press for the first time, both of us, to go and check out and cover some new international art and genre cinema that will be coming out over the next few months. And during the award season, Jamie and I got locked in Clockwork Orange style, watching basically on average 4 movies a day for 8 days.
Crazy.
And we had a gargantuan discussion of all 40 films that we collectively saw, including new films by David Cronenberg, Paul Schrader, Kiyoshi Kurosawa, Francis Ford Coppola, Steven Soderbergh, Mike Flanagan, Sean Baker. The list was on and on and on. And we'd be remiss not to mention Conor O'Malley and Matt Farley, who we talked about as well and got to see at the screenings that they were. So if you haven't heard that episode, that was 2 weeks ago over in the main feed. It was a big, massive episode with lots of things for you to take notes on for your watch list over the next coming months. So go back, go check it out. But then last week, inspired by the release of Francis Ford Coppola's decades in development passion project called Megalopolis, which Jamie and I did see in IMAX at TIFF, the $100 million self-financed indie movie that combines H.G. Wells with Shakespearean tragedy and the Roman Empire and retro-futurist sci-fi and political crime conspiracies and family, everything that you can think of in one movie. We decided to go back to the previous time that Francis Ford Coppola put his professional reputation and independent self-finances on the line to achieve some artistic visions. We talked about his adaptation of Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness as a tangible Vietnam War epic and like psychedelic philosophical nightmare that nearly bankrupted him, Apocalypse Now. And we paired that with his ridiculously lavish and bittersweet attempt to take like a dirtier, bleaker new Hollywood couple romance and filter it through the glitzy and artificial old Hollywood musical melodrama called One from the Heart, which is the movie that literally did bankrupt him. Yeah. He was like, he got really close on Apocalypse Now. He like walked that line. And then 3 years later, he was like, oh, we're burning money, all of it.
And it is truly unbelievable how little money that movie made. I was saying it on the show. I thought that maybe even just his reputation would have gotten him at least a couple $1 million just from seats alone. But I think it was $500,000 or something like that he makes on.
It might have even been less.
It's crazy. It's crazy. So, but both are fantastic. Obviously, Apocalypse Now, obvious masterpiece. But One from the Heart, that was the first time I saw it. And although it is hard to wrap your head around some of the relationship aspects, I think the movie that's wrapped around that ends up kind of fighting for it more so than you'd think. So. It's a
very moving watch when you realize that man nearly destroyed his marriage making Apocalypse Now and then made a whole movie about how wouldn't it be so awesome if like me and my wife were in a musical, like an MGM musical, and we figured it out.
Yeah, exactly.
Even though it makes no sense and our relationship is horrible. Yeah. So if you're interested in that discussion, that was last week over on the Patreon feed. Go back and go check it out if you're interested. But moving on to this week, we are joined for the second time by the co-host of the wonderful We Hate Movies podcast. One of the ones we unfortunately did not get to hang out with and take out for dinner during TIFF time this year. That guest is Stephen Sajdak. Stephen, how you doing?
No, but I appreciate you guys mailing me dinner. That was really nice of you. It was cold and it was just kind of all over the but it was nice. It was really the pooch.
Yeah, Andrew felt it was really important. He was like, "We need to take these leftovers and just
he did like it that much."
No, thank you guys for having me. I'm really excited to come back. I'm excited to be back here in the high holidays, the spooky season.
That's right.
Doing a horror bit here on our show. We're doing all movies that all fourth entries of franchises, so it's nice to do like two kind of wild ones over here, which are kind of, I think Return of the Living Dead is definitely a movie that I love. I came to it really late. Like, it's something that I regret not having in high school because I would have loved it in high school. I only saw
right
it
there with you.
Maybe like 2 years ago.
I'm actually watching it for the first time for this episode, actually. It's actually been one that I've been saving because I knew it was such a big one for the show. And I did have people yell at me at one point. They were like, how have you seen a movie called like Lolita Vibrator Torture, but you have not somehow seen Return of the Living Dead? And so it was been one that I was kind of stickler about. I was like, well, fuck you guys. You know what? I'm going to keep waiting. I'm going to until a guest literally makes me watch it. So Steve has that
6 years later. Yeah.
It was the 4th. Yeah, it was like 2 years ago, the 4th of July. We were hanging out with a buddy at his house, and it was like, are there any 4th of July horror movies? And this is a 3rd of July horror movie. And
True.
So there you go. That's how I found it.
It is kind of interesting that it works as a July 4th film, but a Halloween film all at the same time. That must be a rare double cross right there, you know?
Hell
And
yeah.
then
No, we're very, very excited to talk about Return of the Living Dead. It's one that people have been asking us to cover for quite a long time. Obviously, one of the big staples of the 1980s horror comedy and sort of like zombie boom. But Steve, what was the pairing here? And explain yourself.
I have to explain myself. Well, one, you guys have done everything. Not everything, but almost everything. So like I was like, ooh, what about this? Ooh, what about that? And I was kind of like going through your Letterboxd, like control effing and being like, nope, and motherfucking you every time. But I was happy to see. I was happy to find this pairing. I do think this pairing makes some sense. This is like this. I am throwing you a Halloween party where you bring your buddies over. You got your beer, you got your chips, maybe some pizza. You put on Return of the Living Dead first because it's like the movie that everyone, be quiet, we're watching a movie. And then we're a little buzzed. And then the second movie comes on, which is Ghost House. That is like the most like riffable movie you could just sort of like talk over and have a lot of fun with and like still enjoy because the kills are still great. The soundtrack is fantastic. The dialogue is an absolute joke. The story,
the characters and performances are a little bit less refined than Dan O'Bannon.
Yeah, a little less
and I think that like it doesn't have as much of a political sentiment to it either. It's just sort of like, hey, how much money could we trick people into giving us? Could we even lie that we're part of the Evil Dead franchise? Sure, we will.
Just call it Evil Dead 3. Just see what happens.
Yes, it's so funny. Even though
we'll be talking
I guess
about
at that point there wasn't Evil Dead 3, right? So, but that is still very funny to do.
It's incredible. But yeah, so like that's my movie. This is we're at a Halloween party again. The first movie is like the real movie you want to show your buddies and be like, no, this is this cool movie I saw. It's got great effects. It'll really make you think a little bit. Like it's really funny and we'll have a really good time with it. And the second one, yes, you're gonna be like, I'm gonna go to the bathroom. Please don't pause it.
Wouldn't want to miss Evil Dead 3.
No, this pairing makes a lot of sense to me because one is a horror comedy in a very deliberate and constructed way, and one is in a very uncontrolled Italian horror register where you're like, you spend 45 minutes being like, do I actually know what's happening? I don't.
There's been a couple examples where that's happened. I know the obvious one is Trolls 2, because we covered that on the show in like the first year or whatever. But there's been a couple, I think, Italian movies that we brought on that had that whole, we're going to name it this way so that we can kind of try to get a few extra seats.
I was like, the vibe I was getting was when we did the virtual screening watch with the patrons of Zombie 3.
Okay.
The one that was like Lucio Fulci, but it was like Bruno Mattei, like fixed half of it or something. And we were like, this feels like a movie made by two different people. And yeah, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah.
It was a slippery time in Italian cinema for sure. Well, I will, when we get into it, I have the Wikipedia article open. There are 7 movies in the La Casa series, and I'm so excited to talk about them.
Oh
Wonderful.
My God, 7. Okay, well,
let's go.
Yeah, I'm excited to jump into it and kick off the spooky season over here on the Sleazoids podcast. So let's do it. Let's talk about first year, the Return of the Living Dead.
The police are confused.
Send more cops.
It worked in the movie! Well, it ain't working now. Read the movie line!
It's not a bad question, Bert. It's not a bad question, Bert. It's not a bad question, Bert.
The Return of the Living Dead.
All right, we are talking Return of the Living Dead, the 1985 American absurdist punk zombie horror movie written and directed by Dan O'Bannon and starring James Karen and Tom Matthews as Frank and Freddy, two medical supply warehouse employees who accidentally release a gas that creates a humorously extreme flesh-eating reanimated corpse epidemic that puts them on the path of a bunch of teenage punks played by a who's who of various cult movie actors like Linnea Quigley and Miguel A. Nunez Jr., and also puts them into the line of sight with a bunch of paramedics and cops and every single thing that can have its brains eaten by a gooey zombie. This is our 6th time, I believe, actually somehow talking about writer, director, and VFX supervisor Dan O'Bannon, who got his start helping write and do effects on John Carpenter's debut science fiction film, Dark Star. You might actually feel a little bit of John Carpenter, that's a little bit of Assault on Precinct 13 if it was a slapstick movie in a way. But Dark Star was huge for both of them because it had that sense of dingy working class detail and kind of corporate satire and kind of hangout on a spaceship that would inspire, obviously, some of the work O'Bannon did for Star Wars, and obviously some of the effects and writing he helped contribute to Ridley Scott's Alien. And that he was part of the legendary production design team a little bit. And either way, he worked on those two iconic science fiction and horror movies that set him on the path to helping write or being involved in the effects on, and this list is crazy, Jodorowsky's failed adaptation of Dune, the animated adaptation of Heavy Metal Magazine, that creepy small town folk horror zombie movie we did with Trevor Henderson, Dead and Buried, the creature work, specifically just the creature work on Chud, which is actually, we talked with Andrew from We Hate Movies on the show. Yes. This is so funny. Tobe Hooper's brief run at Canon, which is like Invaders from Mars remake, and his space vampire blockbuster Life Force, which we actually talked with Chris from We Hate Movies on our show. We did the entire Tobe Hooper at Canon run.
No joke. I was just at a bar with my wife having a drink for the show, and they had Life Force on without the sound, and she had never seen it. And I'm like, watch this part. It was the Patrick Stewart puppet moment, and I'm like, her jaw's on the floor. That is a perfect movie to have without sound on. It is a great movie that way.
Yeah, you will be always looking at something astonishing.
Yes.
It's unbelievable. And Invaders too, it's got some great effects, like really fun, just monster designs and everything like that. The layer that they go into eventually, it's great.
Yeah, so he did that entire run, and obviously he ended up co-writing also Paul Verhoeven's Total Recall at a certain point as well. But the thing that stood out the most to me was that this was definitely around the same time that Tobe Hooper was being a goofball over at Canon and making things like Invaders from Mars and Life Force. But I also thought about Texas Chainsaw 2, which I just actually rewatched recently, and I was thinking there's a reason that Tobe Hooper was actually asked to do this movie at one point, and instead passed it to Dan O'Bannon, because they both had a little bit of a similar mindset on what they were going to do with 80s horror effects and what they were going to do sort of satirically. And so smack dab in the middle of Dan O'Bannon's kind of separating runs here of movies, he had his directorial debut, which is this film, a project that started out as a sequel novel, I guess, to the original Night of the Living Dead, and it was written by George Romero's co-writer on that film, John Russo, who, if you don't know anything about John Russo, he's the guy who very well could have come up with everything. He really likes to remind you that he co-wrote Night of the Living Dead, and that George Romero would never have made a zombie movie until he said, George Romero had an idea about like people attacking a house. I was the one who said, like, what if they ate flesh? That's very much John Russo's personality. And they actually parted ways, I guess, quite amicably when they did part ways, because Romero wanted permission to make his, obviously, Dawn and Day of the Dead movies. And part of the deal that he made with John Russo when he was going to make those movies was that John Russo retained the rights to Living Dead and could pursue his own versions of the same things. And so all George Romero just couldn't use Living Dead. That was the only stipulation. Okay. And so that was how this movie got made. This was survival. Yes, and this was being written, I think, as early as like the early 70s or something like that. And eventually in the 80s, they got things moving. They asked Tobe Hooper to get involved, and Tobe Hooper was the one who said, check out my buddy Dan O'Bannon. And,
I think the most interesting part about this is the weird limitation of the Living Dead business and wanting to be a sequel but not be a sequel, and being like, okay, what if it was a movie in this universe, and having that touchstone of, you know what I mean, and it's not even in like a Shaun of the Dead kind of like super aware we're having fun with it way, but like, no, this really happened, but they turned it into a big fucking Hollywood movie. It's just, I find that really, it's a very fascinating way to start this movie, and like the monologue of it is just so, it's so centering and such a interesting. I wish more movies could take that kind of meta approach.
And it does give them room to kind of develop new rules while living in the ones that you already know and you're aware of because of how iconic Night of the Living Dead is. I actually didn't know it until I was just reading on the notes of Wikipedia, but this was one of, if not the first, that introduced the idea of brains specifically, which I think has become kind of like a very iconic thing for zombies.
They almost did it like a gag in this, and then it became everyone's like reference point. Like I'm sure everyone's seen like an episode of The Simpsons where the zombies are talking about brains or something, right? And some people forget that it was a joke in this movie first.
Absolutely. And I do love the idea that they get a little deeper too, where the zombies here are kind of intelligent, and they actually take, like when they take in brains, their pain disappears for at least a moment, and that's why they're just so hungry. But they're also scheming and doing all those things. It'll be fun when we get to those scenes. But it kind of just establishes its own rules while living in the classic.
Yeah, there's a playfulness to it, and I think that is because John Russo is, there's an interesting combination of writing happening here, which is one, you have the very simple formula of it's very Night of the Living. It is Night of the Living Dead. It has the siege movie elements. It has the basic kind of camaraderie and kind of hangout aspect. It has all of those things, but it was also like Dan O'Bannon being able to come in and be like, well, this is going to be molded though to some of my specific tastes. Like I am very interested in the Los Angeles like punk music scene. And so what if my whole soundtrack was that? And I also am more interested in, kind of cynical, goofy satire rather than the kind of Romero depressing satire. And Dan O'Bannon is also he was like an EC Comics guy. And, he did have occasionally could have a little bit of more of an edgier sensibility at times in some of his writing. And so all of those qualities have kind of made their way into what feels like, because I was just watching this again for the first time, and I knew its reputation and I knew what it was that people liked about it. I did not expect to be reminded more of Creepshow than I was any other Romero made movie.
Well, because
I was
the skeleton's practically asking birthday cake. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
100%. Yeah. The zombies are in on all of the gags. It's if anything, they make the majority of them, which is very funny.
The goofy cynicism is really the perfect curveball of this movie that makes it work, because I think any zombie movie or a zombie property worth its salt is you're fucked. You're just totally fucked. Society is fucked. I will always kill myself the second I see a zombie because I know we're never coming back. It's all over with, and I'm not scrounging for food. But there, I think that to do that, to take that to a fun and just sort of find a way to make it fun and not maudlin and goofy, and you know what I mean? And you like these two bumbling warehouse guys, but you watch them repeatedly fuck up, and you watch corporations fuck up and the government fuck up, and it's just that's exactly how this would go. Everyone is a fuck up.
It's just about human beings fucking up endlessly. Yeah.
Yes.
And I love how we were talking about how there's some new rules established with how it is, but because of the satire aspect and how he wants it to be very loose, the rules can be that way too. There's a shot where I think the punks are just driving down the LA River, but they're supposed to be in Louisville, Kentucky, and you're just who gives a shit? You don't care. Yep. It's kind of all part of the punk rock attitude of the whole thing. So yeah.
Jamie, did you? I know that Josh, you watched this the first time. What did you come to it, Jamie? Had you seen this before? Or was this your first time
I watched it for the first time, I think during COVID, actually.
Oh, nice.
And because I was just going down a rabbit hole of every big cult movie and everything that I've missed since I was so bored. And this was one of them. And the first time, actually, I don't know if I was just expecting it to be still a little bit more in the horror realm rather than the comedy, but it didn't attach to me the way that it did the second time I watched it, and I just kind of let loose with it. I think that was it. But now I love it. I mean, we watched it last night with my family actually, and we were just laughing our asses off. It holds up, and everyone was enjoying it, talking about who their favorite character was when they popped up and everything. It's a blast.
The characters are so rich. I mean, rich is the right word, but they are like this is a movie that you can get 12 Halloween costumes out of it. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And they all do have, a lot. Some of the characters are, smaller than others, of course, but they do have their individual personalities. Like my mom was saying how much she loved the dorky punk that was like trying to hit on all the girls but was failing miserably. She ended up really taking to him, and then obviously my brothers were like hooting and howling when the girl strips on the gravestone and everything. It's a very audience friendly movie. It's a lot of fun to watch.
That is a big have your cake and eat it too moment there, where they are like, we know we have to, obligatorily include a moment like this, but man, we are going to take it to the next level, and it's going to become her whole character. She's the naked, sexy zombie.
Just free living,
even in zombie mode. Well, because I had an interesting experience with this, because I think it was. Again, I knew the reputation. I had a lot of friends who this is like their all-time favorite zombie movie even. And I went into this being like, well, that's some high expectations, because I loved Night of the Living Dead. I also came out in 1985, same year. A few weeks later, Day of the Dead that George Romero did. I actually like it. I have a hard time saying it's better than Night of the Living Dead, but I like it almost as much and rewatch it almost as much.
I think I do, but I totally get it.
So I kind of went into this with that, and it just was not quite the movie I expected it to be. It was just like a lighter movie, or a thinner movie in a way, in a really enjoyable way, because clearly they're having fun just making it, and like there's an energy to it, and there's a sly punk sense of humor. I like the gross out splatter qualities. I do like the kind of, you get like a little bit of Carpenter Siege, a little bit of Joe Dante in there, a little bit of Tobe Hooper in his like goofball canon era. So these are all things that I liked, but it was just not exactly what I did not expect, like a zombie popping out of the grave and the music being like party, like let's fucking it wasn't the exact tone that I imagined that this struck, based on how so many people it was like their favorite zombie movie. I was like, this is like, it's not a spoof. It's not, but it's one of those, or it maybe it is in the way that like the best ones are, where they are indistinguishable from kind of like the real thing at the same time. Where it's giving you the gruesome zombie movie moments that you're expecting, but in just such a animated kind of fashion. And from like the get-go, like when you were in the opening scene of the guys just in the warehouse, right after they give you the gag of you should know what you're in for, which is all of the events portrayed in this film are true. All of this happened. All the names are real.
That's like the beginning of a Naked Gun movie. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's so perfect.
Because you're sitting down to watch a zombie film. So as soon as you see that gag works instantly. And it really puts you into the headspace of where they're going to go. Because then they start giving you like useless time codes that have nothing to do with anything about telling like a historical story, or, it's
Jamie,
like a
do you remember
detective.
us watching a movie recently where that happened and we pointed that out too? I can't remember. It was super hilariously pointless, like updates on exactly what time and what place you were in, and I can't remember, but we pointed it out there too. It's actually a great gag every time you do it.
Yell at us in the comments if you do.
We covered this on the show recently. I just can't remember.
I'd be curious if it'd be before or after, because I really love the gag. I think it's very funny.
Yeah. But the opening introduction and the first characters you meet were actually maybe my favorite characters, which was the workers at the You Need a Medical Supply named Frank, played by James Karen, who at the time had quite a few small supporting roles in like All the President's Men and Capricorn 1 and Poltergeist, obviously. And he's training the new young employee, Freddy, played by Tom Matthews, aka Tommy Jarvis from the Friday the 13th movies.
Okay.
Eagle-eye viewers might recognize a regular Albert Pune actor when you see one as well. He was in so many, and I think we might have previously mentioned him on the Dangerously Close or Nemesis episode when we covered that. But essentially Frank is showing Freddy the ropes on the day one of this this medical supply center. And the ropes are literally like how to transport skeletons, prosthetic devices, dogs that have been split down the middle for like anatomy class for vets, and fresh cadavers on the hooks. And it has that great like workplace hangout energy of anytime you've worked a job where you've had to work with like you've been the younger person and like an older person on day one. They always have like a great story for you. And this guy's story is Night of the Living Dead is bullshit. They lied and they didn't tell you, all the truth. The truth about it is that it was chemicals that, that brought all these corpses back to life, and it was this 2,4,5 trioxin in them, which is a chemical satirically based on the Dow Chemical Company's Agent Orange used in Vietnam, which is both a funny gag because they say that's what caused the real life events depicted in Night of the Living Dead, and also obviously partially Romero was deliberately making a bit of a Vietnam era allegory, but also it's just a hilarious gag where Frank says, they changed all the names and facts around it so that they didn't get sued, which they're also doing by calling it the Darrow Chemical Company. And then they accidentally leak that gas from the barrels, which is again solidly made by U.S. Army engineers, they say, right after being like, these things don't leak, do they? The tone is just so perfectly established in these series of like weird like workplace comedy interactions these characters are having, triggering the release of this gas, followed by the sickest like punk theme song credit sequence you've ever heard, as essentially the gas spills out and starts infecting corpses and being like, we are gonna reanimate these.
And it literally melts a face, basically. It's like whatever corpse is in there.
You're in for a face
melting.
melter, they're telling you.
It's fantastic. I love that. I also love the confidence that he says, which is directly to do with the satire and really connects to the ending, especially when he's just like, "Are you kidding? This is made by the U.S. Army," and then he smacks it, and then it instantly shoots out at him. It's just the confidence he has and the strength of it. It's hilarious.
I think their relationship's really good too. Like it's surprisingly sweet throughout the film. You know what I mean? Like at any given point, he should be the gruff old guy who's like, "How you fucked up," or whatever. You know what I mean? But it's never that. They're in it together the entire time. They're bonded. And then that's what makes the comedy work. Where I think that like again, if he is just like the finger wagging older crabby guy, it doesn't work. And James Caan is like fucking on fire this entire movie. He's so fucking funny.
His line delivery is incredible, especially during that monologue about Night of the Living Dead. Like he's so gleeful in telling this kid this information.
Yeah, and like crying and screaming later and screaming his lines out. It still works every single time. It's so funny.
He remains likable the entire time, even when he's doing things that do have that kind of, the senior versus the guy that's just got the job. Like there's one part where he's constantly joking around with him. He makes kind of this like offbeat joke about skeletons and how they get them from India or something like that. I can't remember exactly, but the guy's a little bit uncomfortable.
Like, where do they get skeletons with perfect teeth? Think about it, man.
Yeah. And the guy's like a little bit uncomfortable, but then he makes a joke back, and the guy's like, "Hey, don't joke around." So he kind of has this, I can be a jokester because I understand the job, but he never becomes unlikable by any means. I do love, but like you said, they work together, and his delivery on lines is absolutely brilliant. The boss as well, the guy that actually leaves at the very beginning and comes back.
His Bert, delivery played by Clu Gulager. Is that his name?
Clu Gulager. He's like a big old B movie actor.
That dude was in The Last Picture Show and The Killers. Wow.
Oh damn.
Yeah.
But before becoming a cult movie actor and being in like Nightmare on Elm Street 2 and The Hidden.
Because he's great. I mean, he just has a real confidence to him, and he has some of the best line deliveries ever. He kind of plays the straight man in a sense, like the guy that's trying to get everything organized, but just his reactions to the chaos is 9 times out of 10 hilarious. So I really liked him too.
I actually kind of imagined him as possibly, if we were talking Naked Gun and you wanted to bring Leslie Nielsen into this, I feel like I was like, he would be Bert, I think.
Yeah, 100%.
Just the asshole boss who's having like a bit of a laugh, but also is revealed to be very selfish like later in the movie in like a really funny way.
Yeah, because that's his whole thing. I love that this movie is just basically a corporate cover up gone wrong. This is you know what I mean, like the Exxon spill, just sort of like, what can we do to get away from any kind of accountability? And you do the absolute wrong thing.
Yeah.
The subplot of the army general as like a wraparound story where the army general straight up, his whole gig is like, I hate my life. My wife hates me because I spend every waking moment of my day waiting for like this weird chemical that I accidentally put like the wrong shipping label on to appear so that I can cover this up and fix this at some point. And you actually forget about him until the boss calls him.
That's what I love is that they show him as so unimportant until he just has to destroy everything essentially. But it is just him worrying in his, like, it seems like a very high end mansion or something. Like the way they design the sets, it feels like he's very rich. And he's just doing nothing. Like, and there's even a line, I think it's near the end, but he says something like, yes, it was stressful for all of us. But all he's been shown is just kind of like kind of stressing while drinking tea in his high-end mansion. It's
really sad that I had to nuke Burbank as Kentucky.
I love that when he comes home. He comes home, his wife asks, what do we have for dinner? It's gonna be lamb chops. Your favorite? He's like, I had that for lunch. Who's having lamb chops? That's a heavy fucking lunch, dude. Like, come on.
Yeah. No, it again, and these are just like the throwaway gags to the momentum of the zombies rising. And I think that's where the score becomes so important, the music, because there's like, for me, again, the formula, I guess, is so simple, and like the narrative, the basic trajectory of the narrative is something that you've seen so many times before that you do need something like this kind of propulsing you through it. And especially too, I guess, because the characters are meant to have this hangout energy, so they're not like pushing each other that much. They need to get pushed around by these zombies to kind of make the movie have any sort of momentum. And this music by the composer, I mean, obviously there's some by the punk bands who appear in the movie as well. There's like the Flesh Eaters, 45 Grave, The Damned, The Cramps. It's a great like needle drop soundtrack, but also the straight up just like synth music by the composer Matt Clifford is astonishing.
And it's cool to mix those two, because then again you get the classic kind of that classic horror synth. And he's still able to make it a little bit more 80s. It's a little flashier than it would be. But then you have the punk rock music.
The dun, dun, dun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
I was like, every time I was like, let's fucking go.
Exactly.
And I do love that the heroes of are punks, because usually in your 80s movie pantheon, there's either a token punk who's the weird kid, or the punk gang is the antagonist somewhere or another. You know what I mean? But that our lovable kids are just punks, and it's like this. They're completely out of society. I do love the idea that like we're pissed at Freddy for having a job even at all. You know what I mean?
They can't just hang out at the cemetery anymore. We can't just talk about death and fucking and partying. I love to these are better characters and better versions of these characters, but just the way they talk and how like crass they are too. It reminded me of that movie. Was it Night of the Demons, where all those punks go to they go to a house and a demon comes out, and like they talk to each other with a little more love and respect for each other than they do in that other movie. But it just had that same kind of, just juvenile, but against authority kind of thing. And I absolutely love anytime they open their mouths.
This is the thing too, is that like normally when these kind of characters were included in a movie, they were included in a movie to be like antagonistic, or they were included in the movie to almost be really ruthless and like not be. Yeah, like I was almost thinking of is it Class of 1984 or something like that? Sure. Is that the I can't remember if that's the name of it or not. But
I think it is.
Like that. Like that's kind of what I imagine when I think about the way that like sort of like more counter punk or asshole kids are depicted. And this is clearly one made with, you can tell by the soundtrack, affection for the LA punk scene. Like this is the kind of way that you depict them, I think, after you've just watched like Decline of Western Civilization. You're like, oh, they're kind of, like, oh, look at them.
They even have a character, I can't remember her name right now, but she actually dresses a little bit more I guess what you'd say at that time, preppy compared to the punks.
Yeah.
And she's dating the worker. And
Freddie.
And it is, I think, a character that's kind of like an outsider of their crew being accepted and taking on their more free living lifestyle and all of that. So it does have a more accepting feeling than it does with other 80s films that we've seen.
For characters being named things like Spider, Trash, Scuzz, and Suicide, which are the very great, hilarious names. Suicide is the dude who I particularly liked. He's the dude rocking the sick ear to lip like ring chain.
Oh yeah.
And his whole deal is that he's super pissed off that everyone thinks that he's like scary. He's like, dude, you think this is a costume, man? This is my way of life. And he gets really angry that anybody thinks that he's like an asshole who's going to beat you up because he's got like a fucking mohawk and like a leather jacket. And it's really upsetting to him. And he has that like an existential crisis about it.
Yeah, and he's also built like a brick shit house. And it's a great like, what do you call that? An expectation shift because he dies so quickly where you're like, oh man, once they get suicide, look out zombies, here he comes with a baseball bat. No, he just gets absolutely annihilated.
He gets super annihilated. The zombies in this are particularly
silly
like
and
almost
ruthless.
hilariously disgusting when they get you. It is like, and I mean, I don't know. I guess you could say that, every zombie movie, like I guess it's, Dawn of the Dead, when they get them, it's not like they go easy on them or anything like that.
No.
But there's something about the extremity of how quickly I think it's just like, oh, you fucked up and your head was exposed. Well, now your skull is a blood geyser.
Yeah, I'm gonna bite into you like an eclair. Bite into your skull like it's an eclair. Like and then the noise of the skull bite. I can hear it right now, and it makes my teeth feel weird.
Yeah.
Well, and what's funny is by making them all exclusively like brain hungry, it was actually a quality where I went, well, that's going to make the diversity of the kills not particularly interesting because they're going to keep going for the head. There's not going to be a ton of like arm tears. They're not going to be doing anything too crazy in that department. And I actually thought about halfway through the movie, I was like, oh, this might get a little like they're just going to keep going for the head over and over again. And every single time a zombie it chompers went into a skull, I was like, awesome. Yeah. Let's do it again.
And then the thing is too, it quickly becomes less about the gore gag itself and more about how the zombies approach somebody. Like when they start working together.
Give me your brains.
Yeah, it's so funny when like it got a huge laugh when the one zombie kills the cop that shows up, and then he takes the radio and he's just like, we need more cops.
Yes.
It's one of the funniest things ever.
That is one of the best gags in the entire movie because he's asking for more paramedics because it's the paramedics who have arrived.
It 3 times. Like he does it with the paramedics, and then he does it with the cops later. He's just like, keep sending your people. We want to eat them. It's so funny. Like it's so good.
It's so good. Well, and I was thinking the paramedics one because the paramedics one is followed by that amazing wide shot of the paramedics actually arriving because they got called in, and then they step out of the vehicle and they just go, well, there's no one really here, and then just 1,000 zombies descend upon them, and it's like a fucking Looney Tunes gag or something.
Yeah, and what's kind of wild is that it does feel like Looney Tunes, and it feels so slapstick. And then every once in a while, he'll cut to a zombie actually eating someone, and it's the most disgusting shit you've ever seen. And then it turns into like real horror, like where your body actually kind of jumps because you've been so used to the silliness that gore is kind of more effective than it normally is in another film. Because you're just not.
It's definitely a disarming
anymore.
Quality. The fact that it's having so much fun with some of these characters, like especially the punk characters, because the punk characters, like again, they are dressed in that like 80s colorful, like new wave kind of aesthetic going on. They are very comic book parodies almost in a way, like how they scream about how much they love sex and death. It was like they were. That is like a line that like a parody of a Friday the 13th movie characters would say that before getting like gutted through like a stag porno screen or something like that. And their whole deal is that they're waiting for Freddy to get off work while he's just been gassed, and they decide they're going to drink beers and fool around and vandalize the cemetery right next door. It's like it's having a party, man. It's a statement, And then you get fucking Linnea Quigley, from Silent Night, Deadly Night, and Sorority Babes and the Slime Bowl-orama, Night of the Demons, actually, speaking of Jamie, just bringing that up. And, she's doing a full strip dance routine on top of a grave. Mm-hmm. And you're this is ridiculous. Like, there's no reality to this movie at all. Cut to a zombie eviscerating a man's, like, actually eating brains out of his skull like it's like soup in like incredibly vivid and tangible and textured detail, to the point where you go, like, the visceral impact of that actually does make, it gives you whiplash with some of the, writing that you are engaging with, I think.
Yeah.
And you're cutting it back and forth with, again, Freddie and Frank just like trying their best to figure out their way out of this shitty situation. They do eventually call their boss, who shows up. And I love the half dog that comes alive. That's such a great little animatronic, adorable.
It's a great touch.
It's
the
so
little
good.
Bark.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's such a cool way of showing too. Well, I was actually confused by that moment. I thought it was it an animatronic, or was it the fact that the dead was coming back and that was an actual dog that they were using for scientific purposes?
Yeah, that was a cut in half dog that
okay,
actually,
right.
Yeah, and then like the gas makes it alive in that horrible way.
And I think that works too, because it almost introduces it as this, it's kind of gross because it is a dog, but it has this cute factor to it. And then the next thing you see is that like melted chemical corpse that's just pure dark, and all you can see is the white in its eyes, and it's just one of the most disgusting looking things I've ever seen. But it's still got the, the ADR of like brains over it. So it kind of has still a little bit of silliness in it. But I find that thing to be truly terrifying to look at.
I will say, one of the I think, elements to this that make it one of the more enduring zombie films is the diversity of zombie.
Totally.
Illustration and production design, and it's really, really well done. And like the fact that you get the Tar Man and how goopy he is, the iconic brains, you get like a skeleton version, you get Linnea doing her like crazy pale like naked zombie, you get the split dogs. One of the funniest ones I thought was the Yellow Man, who is the first cadaver who gets reanimated. And I was so interested in the design of the Yellow Man because I was trying to figure out what it was that they were going for, that I actually went through and I pulled out the fucking Shout Factory Blu-ray. I was like, I'm going to watch specifically the special features where they talk about the makeup. And I was shocked to discover that they were like, yeah, that one was just kind of an accident. We didn't really have an idea for that one. And they were just like, make a guy yellow. I don't know. And actually the majority of the special features on that Blu-ray, for anyone who's interested, is the makeup guys going back and forth, like shit talking each other. Because I guess one guy got fired partway through making it and one guy didn't, and literally all they talk about is that Dan O'Bannon was a first-time director and was really hard to work with, and so they were being asked to do way too much for the makeup department than they had the money to possibly pull off, and they have bad blood and none of them like each other.
Makes perfect sense.
Well, fuck, they did a great job for that chaos.
Yeah,
they were stressed out, but man, they were asked by the production designer to do all kinds of wonderful different designs, and it pays off. It gives you a real diversity of what you're looking at with zombies, and sometimes you get the classic just muddy and filthy, and then sometimes you get something like the Tar Man, who I think the look is obviously kind of iconic and just really, really impressive, and how goopy and half melted he is, but also it's the extent of what they had to do. That's one of the few ones that's like just a straight up puppet.
Yep.
Okay, yeah.
Because and they had to get like a Jim Henson puppeteer to do that guy, and I was like, that's.
Do they have did they say if they had a suit made for just the odd shots where he's like chasing them up the stairs and things like that?
I didn't see that, but again, the makeup guys were pretty distracted during their entire interview
with their bitterness,
trying not to.
I actually realized like 3/4 of the way through them all, I was like, I'm not going to learn much for the episode.
They're just trying to one up each other. That's so funny. I guess it does go into though, like the expansion of some of the lore, like. since, for instance, because like you were saying that there was a bit of a risk of like the quantity of what they could really do with it when they're only focused on brains. But one thing that they had to deal with that's new is that it can't just be killed by the brain either. They have to like chop them up and then incinerate them. And if you have to do that for hundreds, thousands, millions of zombies, that's just insanity.
It's literally impossible. Actually, you just brought up one of my favorite lines in the whole movie, which is when they send that pickaxe into the yellow man's head and they pin him to the ground and they realize it doesn't work and that he's still alive and screaming and they just go, "You mean the movie lied?"
Yes.
They're like, "Night of the Living Dead, fuck you, Night of the Living Dead."
It's so perfect.
The zombie's still alive.
Exactly. Now you realize again how fucked these characters are, because you know Clu Gulager is just like, all right, let's with the movie, that's what we're gonna do. And like I love that he orders everyone else to do the dirty work, but then he has to wind up doing it himself. And it just turns into this thing of like, oh wait, I just took that guy's head off and it's still trying to bite me. We're totally fucked.
Yeah, and that just ends up being more slapstick because, I mean, you kind of recognize that even if you were in that situation for real, the moment that the head is like kind of still chomping and the body's running around and everyone's frantic, that
as soon as they
funny.
sawed the head off and the body just started like doing its own thing, I was like, this actually reminded me of one of my, obviously another movie, 1985, one of my favorite horror comedies of all time, Reanimator.
Oh, hell
when the body of the doctor is just going around doing all of its own shit while the, you know, I mean, we didn't quite get the reunion with the head, which is maybe one of the most iconic moments in Reanimator, where the body's actually carrying it around and being like, all right, doctor, what do you want to do today? Do you want to to try to eat out Barbara Campton? But, you know, we'll see. There's nothing quite as perverted or as like bad taste in this movie, which was a little surprising to me, actually, I will say, because by 1985, some of these guys were like, no, we're going to put the most disgusting thing you've ever seen in a movie. This had a little bit more of a pleasant watch to it.
It is really just silly rather than being like the Porky's of zombie movies or something like that, which I feel like it could have been.
Apparently, Dan O'Bannon was like a regular at a gentleman's club in LA, and that's how he met Leanna Quigley, and like he kept trying to offer and all these other women, and like how he wrote this movie or wrote parts for them because he was just like, it makes sense that it's just like, it's just stripping. You know what I mean? It's not so much about sex. It's not the grotesquerie. It's like, no, it's just cool. We're hanging out. That lady's just going to dance on a grave. It's fine. You know, like that kind of a thing.
Yeah. Dan O'Bannon had a horny 1980s because he also wrote Life Force, which was all about Matilda May as the naked succubus from space who literally comes down, spends the whole movie just being like, wow.
All the penetration we talked about for Alien, it's O'Bannon. Man,
true.
Just a freak.
Man, he's definitely a freak.
He's a freak for sure.
I love that we go to the crematorium, and again, like we have a good idea, which is if we could just talk my buddy Ernie into doing this, you know, we could just burn this body up. That has to be the end.
I loved Ernie. The fact that he's just a mortician rocking the cassette player headphones, smoking his pipe while doing his embalming and all of that. He also does get maybe my favorite death in the entire movie, which is him just self-cremating.
Frank self-cremates. Ernie lives to the end.
That's right. Yes. Frank self-cremates.
Oh, Frank just
How does Ernie die
is my favorite thing in the world. Then? He's just in the attic with, I guess it's Tina. Basically, you don't know if
when they're being attacked by Freddy.
It seems like he's probably going to kill himself and her at the same time before the bomb hits, because Freddy's going to get them. And
it's it is kind of a bleak movie, despite the fact that it doesn't have the tone of one.
I think it's funny because the way that they end up doing it is really from the perspective of the military a lot of the time. By that point, so then you're just like. You just know you're about to see all these characters that you kind of have grown to like and love and die, and they don't give a fuck. Like the attitude and the lack of emotion while they're doing it is so funny. I mean, that's part of the gag, really.
Having fun with characters is an underrated quality to just like, you don't need to have the most depth in your characters, but if you just like generally enjoy spending time with them and like some of the ways that the humorous ways they talk to one another, like when they come in with the bag of the chopped up yellow man zombie that they are trying to cremate, and they're like, all right, we got some rabid weasels in here, and we need to throw these in your fucking burner. And he's just like, what? How does that make any sense? Do you want me?
That's
let
cool.
me. You can't just burn an animal alive. Like, let me fucking shoot the weasel in the head. And then they're like, okay, hold on. It's not rabid weasels. It's a zombie, actually. And like,
pretty quick,
these are the kind of
hilarious.
interactions that you have with these characters, and it makes a difference.
Oh, absolutely.
And the idea to cremate and that the cremation actually turns into gas, which turns into acid rain, which actually makes the problem exponentially worse because the rain goes into the graveyard.
I hate when that happens. Yeah. I hate when I'm just like, I'm gonna fucking cremate this zombie, and then instead goes to acid rain, and
it's such a perfect,
it just births more.
Perfect analogy and fuck you to like the Reagan era like politics, and just sort of the idea of like, oh no, we're just gonna intervene and we'll solve the problem really easily. Like, no, there is no solving the problem. Exactly, we'll burn it. That gas, everything has to go somewhere. Is kind of an interesting way that this works out.
Yeah, and I do love that. It's just this constant dark irony that the movie just keeps feeding into itself that I love. This is just,
oh my god, Linnea Quigley's line, speaking of dark irony, that line where they're talking about, do you guys ever like think about death?
Yeah.
You know, like she's playing Trash, who's the redhead punk girl, and her vision of the most horrible way to die, man, it would be like just a bunch of old men like surrounding me and start like biting me and eating me alive. That would be like the worst death I could ever think of.
She's also
of course,
kind of getting off
literally 60 seconds like later.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And that's exactly what happens. She turns into like the life force girl or the conquest antagonist, or you know what I mean? Just this like naked entity of power, essentially.
Like she's the queen of the zombies at the end of this movie, which works out.
Yeah,
she's actually like leading against the cops.
This is kind of just random and unrelated in a bit, but I love Bert Wilson's delivery when they start banging on the door because I think the siege is about to happen, and he just goes, "What the fuck are they doing?" And he just like, are they doing so, like, it's one syllable almost. It feels like he does it so fast, and it I don't know, there's these certain things that a lot of the characters do that I absolutely love just in the performances.
I love everyone's talking over each other, but you know exactly what everybody's saying. You know what I mean? It's so clear what everybody's motivations are. Like in a movie like this, it can get loud and annoying, and I do think that like having the silliness undercuts a movie like this. Again, zombie can get really mean, really bleak, and like I appreciate a little bit of irony as a little bit of a lemon. I'd like some lemon on top of my my shrimp. You know what I mean? Like just a twist of it. You know?
Yeah. And this is
I don't know, man. I do like it, but part of me is like, I like to see the military and science of Day of the Dead, where the two guys just go head to head, and it's just like, well, what if these things just literally tore each other apart in the most explicit and painful way possible? I mean, we've talked about it so many times on this show, but Day of the Dead, that bit where that head gets torn off and you can literally see the vocal cords like stretching and tearing, and like the scream of like pitch shifts as it's like stretching and stuff like that. Those are the kinds of like weird zombie movie details that I feel like matter and make up a movie like that. But also, Romero was always someone who was trying to make it unpleasant in a very pointed way. Mm-hmm. And this one is definitely trying to have more fun with it. It's definitely like, I was reminded so much more of Romero doing EC Comics when the actual sequence explodes in this. And, you get the skeletons literally popping out of the dirt in very iconic fashion, but to punk music where the songs are literally like, do you want a party? And then you get...
They even have like the skeleton open his mouth at that same time, so it feels like the zombies are kind of like, we're here to fuck shit up and have a good time. It's kind of rad, honestly. The one thing I will say,
I mean, I also love the Surf and Dead one with the cramps as well, which is when it's going like full like it's going full siege movie mode, and they're trying to board up the windows, and you literally just get like the singer being like, the living dead are losing their head, baby, and they're straight up, like the skeleton hands like like are reaching through the windows and everything like that. That's when they get the one lady corpse who chomps into the one dude's forehead, which geysers everywhere. They chop her in half and land her in, and then she's the one who gets put on the slab, which was one of my favorite details in the entire movie. Because not only is it like maybe the one moment where they let in a really bleak writerly moment where they try to ask her like, why do you eat people? It's like, it's not people, I'm eating brains because I'm in so much excruciating pain and I feel less pain when I'm eating brains. And they're like, well, that just makes a lot of sense. And that's really unfortunate because I totally understand why you want to eat our brains then. And also it gets that great moment where there is a little bit of a philosophical, it hurts to be dead. Like, I don't like that's upsetting to know. I thought that you were supposed to leave that behind when you left. So there's a little bit of an idea in there, but it's so funny that like the ultimate use of it is like a crazy gore gag, like her attack, or that crazy like cat tail flipping vertebrae effect they do while she's like lying on the slab, just being like, brains, give me the brains.
It's goofy and tragic all at once, which is exactly what this movie is like exactly hitting.
Yeah. And I do think that one, although it still has the goofiness of still watching like an animatronic move half of its spine around and everything and scream and shriek and everything, but when the woman is saying how much pain she's in, and the one line I love, I remember it. I'll always remember it. I think it's great when she just goes, "I can feel myself rot." That's the most metal fucking thing I've ever heard in my life. It's so awesome, and it does make you just feel that pain that they must be feeling and that desperation of wanting to alleviate that pain. So I do think, although it could even maybe use a little more of it, although then it would get rid of how funny this movie is. But I do agree with you, Josh. Like, there's nothing quite that hits that visceral feeling of watching the vocal cords get stretched out and the audio change. Like, I understand. I totally get what you're saying.
I'm also, this is historic on this show, I'm also like a misery guy. I get very impacted by misery more than I do comedy, even though I can appreciate great comedy. It's just when I personally am the most like gut punched, and that's like when I feel like I get the most involved in a movie. And this is it's not at all what it's aiming for. This is like as far to the opposite degree as it can get, while actually maintaining the things that you like about the movie that goes in that direction, like keeping the tangible gore effects and keeping some of these weird philosophical qualities about how painful it is to be dead, and like keeping that stuff in, but also being like, what if this movie had a comically affectionate perspective on punks and punk music, and what if it was absolutely ridiculous, and what if, even in terms of its style, I was looking up who shot this. It was a guy who had shot like really gritty looking 70s movies for like John Milius and Dalton Trumbo, and I was like, this is like, and even the Tobe Hooper movie he shot, which is probably how he got the gig, it was Salem's Lot, which doesn't look like this much either. I was like, this is like so colorfully exaggerated and so ghoulish and kind of, and ironic in a way, and it's a very different look, but it looks fantastic. Yeah,
it kind of treats it treats it like all these ridiculous situations are exactly that, silly and ridiculous, but the pain and the fear of the bodily destruction when it actually does occur is still very frightening. Like, you still feel threatened by the zombies when they're on screen, as silly as they are, even though they're dressing up as cops and being like, there's stuff hey, that you laugh at. Yeah. Like pointing. There's go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. I was gonna say there's stuff that you laugh at, but stuff that like also is unpleasant when you think about it for 2 seconds. And it was great, I think, to rewatch Texas Chainsaw 2 when I was getting ready for this. It just so happened to happen. But there's something so about that movie that it's comically revolting. Yeah. And it's so revolting that you just kind of laugh more. Like, the scenes go on longer and you're like, it's so gross that you laugh, and then you realize you're like, this is so fucking gross. That like, why am I laughing at this? And there was a part of me that thought it was so funny when the Freddy and the older guy Frank are both slowly, because of the gas, they're turning into zombies. They're becoming pale. They're becoming dead. There's this hilarious, the paramedics are being like, we think that you're fucking dead, guys, and you got like rigor mortis going on. There's a couple of extended sort of, there's a gradual development of gags there, but there was one that it builds to eventually Freddy just going absolutely fucking wild as a zombie in the chapel and trying to attack Tina, who was the preppier girl who was hanging out with the punks, and chasing her around the chapel. They have to throw acid acid in his face. He gets acid eyes, which is a really cool effect. But there's a great moment when he's attacking her and attacking Ernie up in the attic and trying to make his way in. And what you're listening to him say, and it's well performed too, but he's like, I can smell your brains, Tina. And he's like, Tina, I know that you love me, and if you love me, you gotta let me eat your brains. And I was sitting there going, like, that's so ridiculous. It's so funny, but it is actually like disturbing. Yeah, and I was like, that would be a really horrible situation to be in.
Well, because that's sort of the drive of the movie. You're watching these two bumbling buffoons who you do kind of fall in love with slowly die and decompose. And yes, the two choices you have are, one is you're going to become Freddy and you're going to become this monstrous piece of shit that's going to eat your girlfriend and this kindly old man that's protecting her, or you go the James Cameron route, which is the most metal way to die, and you fucking get on top of that fucking crematorium thing and slide yourself in. Oh man, does that rule. And he's screaming
while
the entire
Burn the
time.
Flames by Rocky Erickson is playing on the soundtrack too. I was like, let's fucking go. And actually that's one of the few moments too where they actually drop the music at the end of it and just have you sit there and look at that like wide angle frame of the furnace, and you're just like, god damn, that guy. What a choice.
They even have like the small detail of him leaving his wedding ring and everything. And although I think a film like this doesn't necessarily need it, it's just another attention to detail that I have to respect for something like this. They do try to make you care about all of these incredibly wacky and cartoonish characters, and it works. I mean, I love honestly every single one of them. But to the extent, again, it is silly enough that when they die, you're not feeling too much, but it's enough that you really like everyone and you like spending time.
Well, there's enough personality about how these people know each other and care about each other. Like I think about a moment like when Bert decides, we're going to go steal the cop car and we're going to go call some more cops, and they end up abandoning Tina and Ernie, which is why they get stuck with Freddy attacking them and everything. And Bert takes Spider along with them from the gang, played by Miguel A. Nunez Jr. And I think about his performance, Miguel's, in that car when he's like, dude, you're a fucking asshole. Those are my friends. Like, what are we doing? And he's like, no, it's fine, kid. Like, we're just gonna drive. We're gonna go get help. And he's like, no, we're not. You're just fucking running away, you asshole.
And you wind
driving into the zombie herd, like led by Linnea Quigley, and and just the way that they're running over all of these bodies, but then they're getting completely overwhelmed, and eventually they get like the fucking cops rocking shotguns and raincoats pulling up, and they're getting overrun and screaming by about everything. And again, it builds in a very naturally satisfying way when you're thinking about how you would just walk into this as like a typical zombie movie, but it is really in the details where it picks up. Like, you don't just get the cops with shotguns and raincoats just being like absolutely overwhelmed by zombies. You also get that cutaway of, is it Bert who's on the phone with them trying to warn them? And literally he's just listening to them all get screaming and dying by zombie, obviously, and the other characters go, what's going on the phone, Bert? And he literally just points the phone in their direction. He's like, listen to this screaming. What the fuck do you think is going on?
And it's a great, and I love that it's just a great punchline, because in the beginning of the movie you see the tanker and it says, in case of emergency, call, if found, call this number. And that is both the solution and the ironic end to the movie. You know what I mean? It's just sort of like, he finally calls the fucking number and it connects him to the general, and the general's performance is just so great. Like, it's, again, he's been waiting 20 years for this. He's like, yeah, that does sound pretty difficult. Yeah, that's bad. It's just like, it's just so like
acid rain. All right.
Yeah, so chill about everything. Like, just like it's another day. That's the thing that's funny too, is he's been waiting for it, but he's still kind of like just straight to business. He has that military composure.
Yes.
Oh my God, it's so funny, and it undercuts everything.
And on the 4th of July, dropping a nuclear bomb on Louisville.
God bless America, baby. It's so funny. One of my favorite details when they are battling the zombies, when the cops are battling the zombies, is there's one really quick shot where one of the cops tries to headlock one of the zombies and then his head pops off. And it just makes me laugh. It's so silly. But yeah, this film is one of the funniest kind of satires I've ever seen, especially for zombies, but just in general from the 80s. I think it's one of the best.
Yeah. And the soundtrack and the performances, it's like a bolt of lightning. It really, it wakes you up. It's just like, okay, we're watching this movie. I'm into it. I'm way into this movie.
And 90 minutes and it flies. You're just like, oh yeah.
Yeah. And I love too that
and it ends and it does end in as bleak of a fashion as like a Romero movie would. It's just one of those things where you are like, the tone of the movie is so different that you are a little bit taken aback that it's like, oh yeah, this ends on them nuking Louisville, the mushroom cloud going up over all the characters, over all the zombies, and you're like, oh, it's fine. The targeted strike, only 4,000 people died, and we did it. And then it was like, well, yeah, but you caused. Obviously, you fucking nuked Kentucky, and though we get some of the last images are the acid rain just continuing to spread. Right. And they were like, well, yeah. So all of those zombies you just nuked went into the fucking atmosphere, and then the general would be like, no, it's been pleasant for everyone.
Yeah. Or no, he said. I thought he said that it hasn't been pleasant for anyone.
Oh, that this hasn't been very pleasant for anyone.
He was barely involved, and he's just like, yes, I understand. This hasn't been pleasant for anyone. This has been a horrible day for me too. Just we're all equal. We're on the same playing field here.
Yes.
There's something like, oh yes, I understand the president will be in Louisville tomorrow. Yeah, it's like
one of my favorite aspects too is that after you see this, you're kind of, I mean, you're obviously feeling a little bit cynical about humans in a sense, as funny as all of this is. And so for them to rise the zombies up and then just make it a party instead, they're just like, let's fucking take over. Let's go rock and roll, baby. It's a great gag too. So yeah, I love it.
Yeah. Well, I think if we're maybe pivoting towards the reductive rating round, which for you, Steve's, right, remove all the words, all the nuance, and give the movie a rating between 1 and 5, and also any final statements or any final lines or scenes we maybe would have forgotten while we were jumping around like crazy there. But for me, this is a very solid 4. I do know that like for a lot of people, this is like a top tier. This is like an easy 5 zombie movie, and I kind of went into that knowing that, and I think my reaction to it was a little bit like, oh, it's very simple for that kind of reaction. I do think that like Jamie, who said that, I feel like he said he might have had a sort of similar experience, and then seemed to the movie even worked more for him when he knew what it was and he was watching it the second time. I have a feeling that that's gonna end up happening for me, but I do feel like if this was one of my formative zombie movie watches, as Steve was pointing out, like when I was younger, I could easily see it being in that position for me. Coming to it a little bit late and it having seen so many zombie movies, I did, even just comparing it to other 1985 like horror classics for me, I was like Reanimator, I was like some of that like bad taste vulgarity and the gruesome like monster movie tragic horror of like the Frankenstein stuff they throw into there appeals to me a little bit more. Day of the Dead, maybe, in terms of, you know, the political fury and the unpleasantness of it. I liked friend of the pod Will Sloan had a great review where he said that it was kind of incredible that Romero persisted making slow, depressing, kind of angry movies while like the 1980s were so clearly pivoting in trends towards, as he put it, louder, faster, more irreverent, more excessive. Like that was how he put it. And I was like, I totally think that that's exactly what this movie's doing. But this movie is doing it artfully. And Dan O'Bannon is clear. Like, I do think there's something cool about John Russo, who was providing the original Night of the Living Dead style formula and the siege movie qualities and like the basic, you know, maybe some of the basic, you know, political satire that's taking place and the situation that's coming in, and Dan O'Bannon coming in and just tweaking every detail to something he is interested in and giving it that, again, that goofy sense of cynicism and satire, and giving it the EC Comics kind of quality, and giving it the fucking punk soundtrack and punk characters who you actually care about and like, and having some slapstick and hangout energy with these characters. Like, again, it does feel like very simple formula updated for the specific sort of 1980s comic book brand of humorous irreverence and like splatter makeup effects, but it's really, really well done. And the sheer fun of this movie kind of stems from how it indulges the contradiction between the two things, the kind of workplace teenage counterculture comedy and brutally cartoonishly grisly zombie movie that those characters are involved in, and the fact that it still delivers the gross out goods and the production design of the different zombies and the actual makeup effects are so incredible, and every death is, despite the fact that it's a zombie chomping into a skull looking for brains because it feels the pain of existence, is phenomenal. I had a great time every time it hit. And and I do think actually for me, one of the things that's going to make me come back to this is the really, really just incredible soundtrack and theme song. And so yeah, I'm excited to have a little bit more time with this and give it another go when I know what it is, and also maybe watch it in more of a, I didn't know it was going to be such a party movie. Yeah. This is such a great party movie. That's the next time I watch this movie, it will be in a party setting for sure.
Drunken cinema would be great for this.
Yes.
Oh my God. Yeah, no, I'm gonna for it as well. I think this is great. I agree with everything that you said. I guess I love the added philosophies and rules that they're kind of bringing to zombie movies while also being a complete spoof. It's interesting to kind of establish that it's like, no, these are the zombie rules, but then also be such a ridiculous and cartoonish film and a straight up comedy. I love that it's constantly kind of it's contradicting itself in a way, but it really does end up working together. Like it ends up making the tone, really, all of the contrast. So I think it's very interesting that way. And it is kind of like if you watch this first before watching any other zombie film, I guess it'd kind of be like watching Dawn of the Dead before Night of the Living Dead. It would be a weird thing to kind of establish this is what a zombie film is, and then you start watching the darker stuff as opposed to how I've done it, which has always been the darker stuff and then lead into the spoof. So I do, when I watch this, I totally understand why someone would think that this is their favorite. It gets up there for me. It's probably,
I forget who it was. Someone in the Discord said that it's the Repo Man of zombie movies, and I think that's a perfect description. Totally. I forget who it was, so sorry. Shout out to whoever it was, though.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally get that. But yeah, I think this is great. And I wanted to say this. I'm going to give a little shout out to my mom, because I ended up just happened to watch this with her. She was over and we were about to watch it, and she said, okay, I'll just stick around and watch it. And she was laughing throughout every single gore gag, awesome. Like just howling at the screen. And then afterwards, I was talking to her and she was like, oh yeah, that was great. I love that. And she ended up talking to me about Thanksgiving, the new Eli Roth movie. And she's like, I just watched that last night. It was so funny when they were putting that woman in the oven or whatever. And I was just like, oh, this is where I get it. Jamie. No, this is where I get it. I'm like, without my mom, I'm just realizing without my mother, I would not be doing
We know
this
where
show.
Jamie came from. You know why you have the show you have.
I was just shocked. It was just very funny to hear her laugh that hard at something so violent, but obviously still a spoof movie. But anyway, I just wanted to give her a shout out there, because it was very funny that she had the same sensibilities as us. I know where I get it from now. But anyway, 4 out of 5.
For you, Steve.
Yeah, I'm going to go 4 out of 5 as well. Again, this is my second time through, and I'd be curious. I feel like it might even go to like 4.5 the next time around. I just feel like you're going to get more and more out of this. I think the first time around, I was like, the tone took me for a walk, and this time around, I'm like, oh, this is that comedy movie. And like, I really just sitting with the comedy and sitting with the great performances and sitting with the incredible effects. I just a shout out to James Karen. James Karen, FYI, in the tri-state area, New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, there was a shitty grocery store called Pathmark, and he was the voice of Pathmark. So every week he would be on local television, just being like, ham $4.99, toilet paper 2 for a dozen, and like that is my experience of James Karen, and I never saw him go fucking ham on a movie like this. And it's so interesting to watch this older dude just fucking demolish this movie. And he's so fucking funny. Mm-hmm. Every moment of him screaming, wailing. I love the moment. There's a moment between him and Freddie, where he kind of does do like, Freddie's like, we got to call the cops. He's like, we can't, if you like this job, young man. He's like, if you like this job, like, it's just this hilarious thing. Yeah. They're dying and sweating and gas. yet he's still kind of trying to be the boss. An amazing power play.
That's the American worker drone versus the punks who don't believe in jobs. Yeah,
it's so fun to watch this movie. Enjoy yourself.
Hell yeah. All right. Well, I think that's going to wrap it up for Return of the Living Dead. We are going to be right back, and we are going to be taking a little bit of a pivot here. We're going to be talking about Ghost House. Stick around. All right, we are back, and we are talking Ghost House, the 1988 Italian horror film written and directed by Umberto Lenzi, despite the credits saying otherwise, and starring Greg Rhodes and Laura Wendell as an amateur radio operator named Paul Rogers and his girlfriend Martha, who pick up strange screaming signals coming from a creepy 1960s house and decide to investigate its history of little dead girls and creepy clown dolls. This is somehow our very first time talking about Italian cult genre filmmaker Umberto Lenzi. Every time you think you've talked about all of them, two more heads pop up like zombie style.
Can't be stopped.
Similarly to some of the ones that we have discussed, though, like Mario Bava, Lucio Fulci, Sergio Martino, these kinds of guys, he got his start making whatever cheap genre trends could get him financing in Italy, whether it was like a Hercules Sword and Sandals picture or a spaghetti western, poliziotteschi, espionage movie, sexploitation, whatever. From what I could gather, Lenzi basically did them all, eventually finding his calling in horror, but not the usual giallo or supernatural zombie horror entry point that a lot of other guys did, although he did try his hand at both of those things, and he did do like Seven Blood-Stained Orchids and Eyeball in the 70s and 80s. But where he really made his name was actually the Italian cannibal film, which he is technically credited with the first ever one called Man from the Deep River, which he then followed up after the cannibal Holocaust boom, they're calling it. He did two other ones, one called Eaten Alive with an exclamation point to separate it from the Tobe Hooper movie Eaten Alive about the killer alligator in the swamp. Which is actually more about a killer like motel runner. I actually kind of forget the plot of that one a little bit. Though. It's actually pretty good though.
I love the idea that there's gold in them there hills in cannibal movies. It's like you can make 1.5 times your investment. It's not that much money, you know. No, but his big one that people have probably heard of is one called Cannibal Ferox, which I have not seen because I've even heard people who like Cannibal Holocaust be like, yeah, this is like the low rent version of that. Yeah, it's all right. And it's funny to hear that from people, and it's just interesting because you could just kind of tell, I guess, he seemed like he has the career of a guy who was maybe like a little bit jealous of the fact that some of these Italian guys had like the one movie that was truly theirs that truly popped off. And this guy, you know, despite being like a fairly, you know, he's an Italian genre filmmaker people know the name of, he doesn't have like the Beyond. He doesn't have a Blood or Black Lace, and no one really agrees that this guy has like a masterwork of the genre that justified his career. He kind of really did just never go above a certain level, with the exception of, I haven't seen it yet, so I'll have to check it out myself to see. From what I could tell, some people actually really like his poliziotteschi. Yeah, there's one called Almost Human with Henry Silva in it, and another one called Rome Armed to the Teeth, which I just need to watch because it's just one of the sickest titles I've ever heard. Those are the ones I've seen people, you know, kind of go as high as like 4 stars on from some friends. But that's like the extent. It's funny, his really trashy stuff that has like a sort of like a bit of like a cult enjoyment factor seems to be the stuff that rose to the top. It was Cannibal Ferox. It was the movie Nightmare Beach, which was the only other one that I watched because I had actually never even seen one of his movies, and I was kind of curious about what his vibe was. And it actually didn't help me to watch Nightmare Beach because I feel like I got less of
of his vibe. And then it turns out that was kind of like ghost directed a little bit. But that's a spring break slasher where the killer kills every single character by electrocuting them with his motorcycle. Yep. So if you are interested, it's an like awesome. You do wonder, you're like, he's really not going to kill anyone like another way. And
he's not. No, that's the only way he can do it. We did that on the show a million years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a giallo version of like Miami Connection. That's like the best way I could kind of describe the vibe of Nightmare Beach.
It does look like there's a movie here called Eyeball where it has a robed skeleton zombie kind of guy, which we do eventually see in Ghost House. So I'm curious if that okay. I don't know if there's any connection there at all.
Maybe that's the Oturist lens we should be viewing this through. Stephen, I have to ask you, have you seen any other Lenzi movies? Do you have any Lenzi knowledge to bring to us?
I wish I did. I do have some La Casa knowledge though. In terms of, so this movie it's Ghost House. It was coming out in Italy, and they were like, well, what if we're going to rebrand it to trick people into thinking it's the third Evil Dead movie, because La Casa 1 had come out, which is the Evil Dead. La Casa 2 had come out, which is Evil Dead 2. So this is La Casa 3, aka Ghost House. It was successful.
The Italians are the goat of this. They are like, there's literally no one better at being like, we're going to rename it an Italian title and then just do a sequel that has not even like no relation, but it's like not even a knockoff of the thing. Nope. Like it's not even like remotely like you're trying to trick people into being like, this is Evil Dead 3. And it's not even like we're doing the Italian ripoff of Evil Dead. It's nothing like one of those movies at all. It's just literally a different movie.
Nope, it's mostly a poltergeist knockoff. So then we go to La Casa 4, aka Witchery and or Witchcraft, depending on who you're asking, which is a David Hasselhoff horror movie, which I want to watch.
This one has Linda Blair in it too, right? I watched that. I saw that and I was like, what the hell is that?
And then we have La Casa 6 and 7 are just House 2, the second story, and House 3, the horror show. So that would be a great box set to have, although no one has the rights to all these movies, is the full La Casa series, and try and make sense of it.
I have to wonder which ones were also successful, because from what I understand too, this one actually was financially successful, calling it Evil Dead 3 in Italian. And I have to sum that up partially to obviously how big that title is, but also Steve was pointing out just before we were talking, it's got one of the sickest posters I've ever seen. If you look on IMDb. Yes. It's like this like white-eyed evil electricity girl holding like the most R.L. Stein version of the Poltergeist doll, grinning. She's holding like a tape, and she is literally floating outside what we'll find out is literally the house from Lucio Fulci's House by the Cemetery.
She almost looks like she's sitting on it even. It's very interesting. It's in
badass. A way, the poster makes this, and I would say the first 5 minutes makes this movie feel like, oh, it's Poltergeist with balls, but it's not. You know what I mean? It's
no.
It's.
There's a lot of hangout in this.
There's so much. Like, it gets so sleepy towards the middle, and like people just like. I love the idea that all these murders happen, and they're like, "Hey, kids, you got to get out of here," and they're like, "All right, no problem. It's going to take us a couple hours to pack up." Like, how does it take you a couple hours to pack up? Your brother is dead. Like, you know what I mean? Like, just grab your shit and go.
It has this weird effect too, where there is a lot of hangout, but when they do a gore gag, it is usually pretty explicit, and so that kind of shocks you. It is in a much lesser way. It has that thing of Return where it's funny and funny and funny and funny, and then all of a sudden it's very gross out. Whereas this, it's more like it's boring, and then all of a sudden it's super violent, and you're like, holy shit, I didn't expect that.
Yes.
And also the difference is that like Return of the Living Dead is funny again in a very constructed slapstick. We know exactly what we're doing. We've designed it to be likable and funny and like actually have comedic timing. And this is funny in like a surreal, I don't know that I actually understand why that person said those words kind of way.
There's for instance, there's an opening example where I think it's Paul and his girlfriend Martha.
Yes,
is that her? Yeah. And they're talking, and
There's a lot of that. There's a lot of Paul and Martha talking.
And they're saying like he's talking about a pretty serious topic, and then as soon as the conversation is over and the dialogue is over, she just kind of leaves as if it didn't happen. And there are a lot of moments of that where it doesn't feel like the people are like properly responding to what has been set up within the dialogue, I guess.
Well, even so, more.
Well, they're Bostonians. What do you expect?
Yeah, they're in the sickest apartment in Boston. This thing is like it's a city block wide. It probably was a convenience store at some point. They turned into an apartment. It rules. I love. He's a ham radio operator. He hears this disturbing noise or whatever, but he's about to get down to some sex with his girlfriend, and he's going to lure her with chili. Did anyone notice this? He's
awesome.
Like, the chili is
in my notes right here, dude.
The chili is ready. And she's like, ooh, keep it hot for me. I'm like, chili sex? Honestly, folks.
My literal note is chatting about the Celtics game and making sexy pots of chili.
Chili.
That's literally what they're talking about on the and also what's with that thing where he's like, who's more popular in Denver, Kim Basinger or Kelly LeBrock?
Yes, I was like. He's a shortwave radio operator, which is like kind of like early like internet kind of forum. Like you would just talk to people, I guess, via shortwave radio, like either truckers or other enthusiasts who had.
He was starting like a Reddit topic.
Yes,
and
exactly.
Then, while making chili to have sex with his girlfriend with. Yeah.
Yes.
1988. This was what the life was just like, man.
I guess also right before this, because we did mention just the little introduction they do with the family and the girl, where there's like those murders.
Well, because it's a totally different movie. It's like the opening prologue in the 19th. Yes, it is. I was actually like, oh, is that what this movie is? Right. And then I was like, it's not.
It's all of it, apparently. Like, it's supernatural. It tries to be the giallo, but then even the giallo aspect ends up being supernatural as well. It's trying to juggle a few things.
It kind of opens on like what you expect the climax of an Italian horror movie to be. And straight up with like the cat murder and everything too. Because I was thinking, I can't remember what the Italian version of the black cat that we covered that like I think it was Martino did it at one point, and you know, like having a little girl like stab a cat to death with scissors, and having the dad's reaction just being like, she's being weird.
A little strange.
I don't know what's going on with her and her little like clown puppet that she sings like weird like nursery rhyme lullaby songs to.
And on her birthday, no less. By the way, we find out at the end of the movie the whole reason this all happens is this cheap bastard works at a mortuary and just steals shit from people, and this doll was intended to be buried with another little girl, and he's like, well, that's
connection between the movies there, by the way.
So
the mortician element. True. There you go.
Now, we're making connections all the time. We're finding them.
Now, I'm so glad you pointed this out, Steve, because one, it's like, obviously it's very, very funny that this clown puppet is just like causing murder and really gruesome murder to the families too. Cause like a zombie hand pops out behind the dad and fucking splits his head open with an axe, and
amazing
a fucking mirror like, fucking distorts and then explodes, like taking out the mother's eyes before the fucking slices her throat open, and the Italian prog rock kicks in. You're like, oh, Italian horror. Let's fucking go. Like immediately you're into it. But it's so funny when you get like to the final expository elements of this movie, and you're like, he stole a doll from like a little kid's casket of like presumably his family was like a client, and gave it to the girl, which caused all of this. And the thing that I thought was even funnier, because like that's just a hilarious detail in and of itself, is they never actually tell you what, like, it's an unidentified murderous spirit.
Yep.
Because like it's not, you're not like is it the doll? Is it like the ghost of the little kid in the doll who's like, hey, you stole my fucking doll? Is it like the family killer? Is it there's also just like random zombies walking around that you're like, is it the zombies? They end up solving it by burning the little girl's like tomb or whatever. And I went, what it was it the girl? Like you literally don't know. You just know that this dad was a cheap asshole, and as a result, murder.
Yes.
And they also a seemingly unrelated Rottweiler ghost that is just kind of hanging around. That's barking at people.
Amazing.
That was
it literally shows up for a moment and then it's gone, and they never address it.
It's so strange. Yeah, it's you'd think that it would just be one part, one second in the introduction to introduce it, but it never happens. And then they have one moment with it where it's barking at the one guy, and then he throws something at it, and it goes through him, and then he runs away, and nothing happens. And then later on, it comes back again, and it just chases the girl into a room, and then once again, that's it. That's the threat. And it kind of reminded me, I guess, of Argento a little bit, because he's had a couple dog chases that were almost funny at certain points, like how
we covered Tenebrae a couple months back, which has like the most athletic and elaborate dog chase sequence I've ever seen in a movie. This isn't
relentless,
quite, it's not. That's just it. Is Argento was really flexing his craft around the time that he made that movie. This is one where I have to, Lenzi requires more research, but not a lot of craft.
No,
I think there might be a reason
outside of some, some art direction, some location work, like a little bit. Like I did see that he did retain quite a few of the production crew from Michel Suave's Stage Fright. So his like makeup team from that movie is who's like doing the gore for the movie, and like that's pretty nice. And the cinematography by Franco Deli Colli, who's like an Italian grindhouse legend in the 70s. He shot What Have They Done to Your Daughters? He shot Strip Nude for Your Killer. He also shot, and I hate that I know this, he shot this Pupi Avati film that I saw on a print like maybe just a year ago called Revenge of the Dead. Mm-hmm. Actually one of my least favorite like Italian horror movies that I've seen, just because it's like a zombie occult conspiracy movie, and it has weird details about like priests and scientifically engineering reanimation electric dirt or whatever. And I went into it being like, it's very clearly pitched as like a Fulci or like a Romero thing, but it really just is like more of a really slow like procedural giallo that they hardly deal with anything. But the best thing about that movie 100% was actually some of the look of it and the locations and the production design. Like there's tunnels and reflections, and there's like some rundown architecture, and the characters are just like walking around like moonlight and stuff like that. And so when this gets to go set piece mode and they do just get to show you insane imagery, that's like the close, which I mean, it's not a new argument to make about an Italian horror film. There's so many that are like just loosely strung together plots to get you this incredible sort of like nightmare logic set piecing. And again,
it's completely
the craft
surreal.
level is not on an Argento or a Bava or, even a Fulci level or anything like that. But it does get a little bit of energy when it does get into those sequences, even though you do watch them and you're like, I don't know that I know why any of these things, are happening until obviously the very end, where you're like, oh, a guy stole a doll.
Yeah, and the thing
I guess that's why
is because of all of the kind of the duller moments and the hangout, the kind of just really that is what you're doing. You're just hanging around and kind of getting to know the people. When it does go into those surreal moments, I just found them to be very much more whiplashy than they normally are with these kind of Italian films, because like there's that instance where the guy goes, I guess we're being a little scattered, but I don't know if it matters that much. But where he breaks through
it's a scattershot movie. I'd be honest with
exactly.
you.
Where he breaks through the floor, and then he breaks through the second floor, and he's in like. Well, at first I'm like, what, did he dive into milk? And then all of a sudden it's more like boiling wax, I suppose. But that feels so surreal. It's like, now are you in this world where the house is built upon like a bunch of melted wax? I don't even understand how this is happening.
That's definitely the closest this movie gets to being like, I don't know, something like Inferno, for example.
Yes.
Where you're just like pure surrealist, what the fuckery.
And shortly thereafter, he's like covered in this goop, screaming in pain, and his girlfriend stabs him in the back by accident because she thinks he's a ghost. And I'm like, I would be like, thank you so much. Honestly, I did not want to live another minute with this shit on me. Thank you so much.
That also might actually just be the best death in the movie too. The fact that guy is like covered in what just looks like melted cum all over him, and he's groaning like a zombie, and she goes, well, I'm just scared out of my mind, so I'm going to stab the shit out of this zombie. And I'm like, that's actually the closest to movie logic that I completely followed in this movie. And I went, that's fantastic. And because a lot of the other times I'm just like, I don't know, like, again, like a dog just appears for a scene.
And
there's the bizarre hitchhiker character, Pepe, who I never got a lock on what his deal was the entire time.
Just because they make it's unfortunate because they make him like, at first I thought he was going to be more of the comic relief or something like that.
Yeah.
But because every single time he interacts with somebody, he just really creepily, it's not like it's like a prank.
Yes.
He very creepily scares them with the skeleton hand, up to and including at one point where Tina is just hanging out on a tree and he makes it seem like he's gonna strangle her. He's never met this woman in his life.
He puts a glove on the skeleton hand to make it like a black glove, like Giallo killer hand. And I was like, dude, you did that on purpose.
And then she pulls it off and you have the skeleton hand, so then you have that supernatural element, and then he pops out and he's like, hey, could I have a place to stay? And you're like, fuck no, you're insane. What is wrong with you?
She's like, I literally don't know who you are.
Yeah, like, I've never met you. You just did that. That was very threatening. He was such a weirdly written character that I couldn't like latch onto him. Although I found him funny because he was so strange. But again, I couldn't really understand what the point of him was. He has one line at the beginning where he goes, if you don't believe in ghosts, you're a fool, or something like that. So it's almost like he's a premonition or a warning for what's to come, but it never just turns into anything, I guess. And
this movie deals in archetypes in baffling ways, because when Paul and Martha, played by again Greg Rhodes and Laura Wendell, they are the people who pick up on these radio signals, because for some reason this 1960s murder suicide of this family has like it's spreading through this fucking ham radio that the guy's picking up on. So he's like, I'm a Boston fucking computer science student or data processing student, so I'm gonna take a little drive with my girlfriend and go check that out. And they arrive at what is once again Lucio Fulci's house by the cemetery, which is something that I was funny enough, I was thinking about it because it's also about a guy who investigates the house, and he even looks into like these tapes surrounding the history of the house, and eventually discovering the Dr. Freudenstein monster who lives in the basement. And I was literally thinking about that before I whipped out my House by the Cemetery Blu-ray and was like, okay, it's the same house.
Gotta be
even just with less repulsive monster effects and like less of that eerie, disturbing tone that Fulci has. It's very much a sillier movie based around the entertainment value of kind of bizarre details, because again, you get them picking up that hitchhiker. You get the use of, speaking of the archetypes, like the creepy caretaker character played by Donald O'Brien, who is slumming it hardcore after being in like John Frankenheimer movies in the 60s, like The Train and like Grand Prix and stuff like that. And his role is to grimace and spit at the idea of there being like college kids who know things about, he's a computer. What do you mean? And then they go, and then the Martha being like, he said that we were snooping. We just got here. And I was like, you guys are literally snooping.
Yeah,
you guys are literally.
Well, you're about to snoop if you snooped yet.
Yeah.
You are snooping.
And the funniest thing about the creepy caretaker is, as soon as you see one, it's going to be a red herring.
Yes.
That it's like he's the guy, he's obsessed with the house, he's going to be the person who's killing people. But then it turns out he's still a killer.
Yeah,
he's not the killer. But he still kills people.
Much like the ghost dog, he's an unrelated thing that's happening in this movie. Like, he is also killing people for reasons.
And what's strange is that they still paint it like at one point he's chasing somebody, and then you're like, okay, he's the guy that's gonna. You still don't quite think that he's the killer, but you're just kind of confused, and you've accepted that he is one of the killers, I guess. And so he's chasing the person, and then eventually they kind of get away, and they don't see him for 5 minutes, we'll just say.
I thought they were gonna martial arts fight him briefly, like the one kid in the denim jacket. Like he looked like he was like stanced
could
out.
do that. Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. That would have been fucking awesome, to be honest. And then they cut back to him later, and he's like hanged himself. So now they've done the thing where the threat has been nulled, but it's you know that it's still out there because it's something else is still happening. And it's just such a strange thing to set up, because he has been set up as a killer already, and normally what they do is they'd make you think maybe he is, but not show you that. And then when he hangs himself, you have the moment of, oh, he's not the killer, and we have to continually search for the killer.
Yes.
But it just that doesn't make any sense with how they write it. So it makes you feel it's surreal the way they write it, because none of that makes sense. So you get in this weird dream logic, whether they are on purposely doing it or not. And that
did you guys ever figure out why there's already 4 people hanging out at the house on vacation?
They just said they're on vacation, and like I guess they're kind of camping,
like ghost hunters or something.
Yes, but who camps outside of a dilapidated house? And
it's a deserted house that has an
Baggins.
evil aura, and they're like, yeah, this looks like the exact spot that me and my 4 friends are just gonna like hang out. And also, it's your voice on the tape, dude.
Yes.
And he's like, that's weird, man, but it's not me.
That is not
But
me.
I'm gonna still keep hanging out at this place. And I mean, we should talk about the music. Is awesome.
Yes.
The score itself, which I do own on vinyl, is fantastic. But also the lullaby theme is this.
Do you want to hear the lullaby theme literally 600 times?
Yes.
This is the movie you're looking for.
Yeah.
And because it's such a bad. Because someone says like, "Oh my god, it sounds like laughing." I'm like, no, it doesn't. It sounds like someone is learning a new language and just like door, da ba da da. Door, de ba, bella. You know, like it just sounds like someone is doing a language tape.
And
with
it's honestly
creepy music
really,
behind.
if I'm remembering it correctly anyway, it's more like quicker in tempo than you'd think a creepy lullaby thing would be.
It's a little dancey. It's a little dancey, and it's also done on like the cheapest Casio you've ever.
Oh yeah,
like,
for sure. It's nothing like the I love that lullaby from The Innocents. And obviously, I wasn't expecting this to get to The Innocents level, of course.
There's a little bit of handsomeness you maybe aren't expecting out of this movie that takes place
absolutely.
in that.
But just the tone of that, the tempo, the pacing of that lullaby, and it sinks in with you. And this one just feels again too repetitive. It uses it too much to the point that it just completely gets rid of any creepy factor. Because
I did actually find it funny at a certain point in a very entertaining way, where it was like I was like, oh, do you think the doll's around the corner? Oh, exactly. I think the dolls has entered the room.
And the amount of times and honestly, this did become funny for me, and I enjoyed it. The more the times they did it, was just having the doll be in a place, and then they cut back to the doll, and he's got his little smile on with the jagged teeth, and he's just like, I am an evil doll now. For some reason, the more times they did that, the more times I liked it. I actually did kind of sink into that.
It became incredibly funny is that, like, obviously it's like kind of the cheapest way that you could shoot like something to show you that like something supernatural is occurring, and it takes so long for these characters to figure out that something supernatural is happening. Like random bottles are exploding, the fireplace is shooting fire, there's like a weird like head spinning around in a washing machine that like the Martha is witnessing, which is actually a pretty creepy little shot. And immediately a scene like that is followed by they all go outside surrounded by the car. You have like the Paul and Martha and their 4 vacationing the Massachusetts ghost house friends that they've met, and literally one of them goes, man, do you think like there's something supernatural about any of this? Like, this is weird. And the one guy's like, I don't know, all I know is computers. And then their whole plan formulates around his knowledge of computers. Will be like, we're just going to keep listening to the radio and see what happens, I guess. And there was something. It's not quite as good. I feel like if like more intentional, I think they really could have like landed some of the comedy a little bit more, because it reminded me of that slime ball bolorama when that one character brings up, hey guys, I've heard that like wishes sometimes go bad when like genies like offer you this kind of shit, and they're just like, shut up, Paul. We're making our wishes, dude. It's fine. And then here it's like computers aren't going to help you against whatever the fuck is happening.
Well, because it's like, okay, this sounds an awful lot like me getting murdered. I'm going to hang out here. Why don't you go a mile away so you can do your ham radio, and you'll hear whatever happens tonight. Oh, is it me getting actually murdered? Like, nothing is not like at a certain
by
point
a rusty fan blade that just like shoots in my general direction.
That's a pretty good death.
Yeah, that wasn't bad.
It's one of those things where like there's no supernatural thing keeping them there aside from just like, I don't know, we parked our RV here. I'm not going to move it.
It's like just they're that intrigued, they're that interested by the entire thing that they just keep staying, even though death is happening around them. It is very strange in that sense that they have no real responsibility to be there, and there's no real excuse. Actually, to be honest, at a certain point, they even leave and then come back. Like that honestly was the most bizarre thing to me, because most horror movies are
structurally that's very, very funny.
Well, because they're all built around the sense that it's like you can't get out of the house. All the classic horror movie haunted house movies are always like they're trapped in some way, and then they get out by going through the woods or whatever it is. And with this, it's like, no, we just get back into our truck and we go back to Boston. We do a little research and then we come back. It felt like breaking that tone.
That is actually one of my favorite sections of the movie, though, when the boyfriend just gets really into Jack the Ripper, and he reads one book on Jack the Ripper, and he's just like, dude, Jack the Ripper is fucking awesome. Do you not know anything about Jack the Ripper?
And she's like, what are you talking about? Shut up.
And that's such a great moment where he literally is just like, I just read this, and now you're an idiot for not having just read this. Also, by the way, that was, and it's just,
and she literally goes, did you just read that like while I was in the shower?
And he's like, yes. And you're
it's really
idiot
good
for not also reading it. Honestly, that made me laugh so hard, and I just could not understand what the writer was going for in that sense. But
but then they have this big blowout about Jack the Ripper, and then she still goes back with him. I'm like, no, we're in a fight. You can go fucking go on your haunted investigation by yourself. Nope, they don't. No, they do not.
Yeah, and at this point, someone has already been killed by the little girl and her doll, who are appearing up on like TV screens. The one dude gets his throat cut by the rusty blade to like a hip hop beat in like a weird way.
Tina gets cut in half.
The one
guillotine.
Yeah, basically. The one dude in the bandana and the denim jacket combo is the one who gets into the fight with the caretaker and has the interaction with the ghost dog. Martha is almost strangled to death by the clown doll. And I was at this point, I was like 45 minutes in, and I was like, "This is that Italian director guarantee. What the fuck is going on? I'm a little bored. I'm a little entertained. I'm like, what the fuck?" Right. And that is when they decide that they're gonna leave, and they go, like literally, that's when the detective like takes the body away, and they go, there was a terrible crime committed here almost 20 years ago, and it was unsolved. So
by the way,
watch out for all that stuff.
Bye.
And he has to
and like that's what and that's when you go, they get obsessed, they get deeper into it or something, and it's literally like, no, let's go back to Boston. Let's go hang out for this.
It's so fucking strange.
Similar to the Jack the Ripper tip, this detective character's in three scenes. It's one, something happened here, you kids should leave, which they don't. Two, it's him in the detective's office, and this other guy's like, I got a really bad feeling about that ghost house, Captain. And he's like, you know what? We can't have a panic here. You know about the Salem witch trials.
Salem, yeah.
And I'm like, what are you talking about, Salem witch trials?
He's like, that guy was like, wow, he pulled it out that card again. The one time we got it wrong.
The one time, dude. Hundreds of years ago. Come on, man.
Boston PD has a perfect record except for the Salem witch trials.
I'm not talking about witch trials.
I'm not talking about burning women alive. I'm talking about boarding up an old house, dude. These are two different things. Please relax.
Oh my god!
It's also so funny that it's set in Boston. I could not figure it must have just been a tax credit thing or something. But they mention it a lot.
Yeah, they sure do.
They definitely do. The one I did the one shot with Tina when she does get guillotined, which also kind of goes with the whole surreal aspect. Because what the fuck is that guillotine just doing up there?
Yep.
But who cares? And then
it literally doesn't make sense. It's awesome. And then that shot of the rocking horse in the middle of her two split body part. Like it looks like that shot when a magician cuts someone in half.
Yeah, and
it's awesome.
And again, there is kind of a surreal aspect to it with just the logic of the movie, because in the shot, she lays down and then it cuts her in half, and you think, okay, she's just cut in half. But then when they where they cut to that shot with the rocking horse, she's like 10 feet apart from the other side of her body, and again, I think it's probably just a mistake logistically, but it creates this weird surreal aspect to your brain of just like, that didn't make a lot of sense, but all right, we're along for the ride.
Yeah. I think one of my favorite shots is when Paul finally meets up with the mortician guy, and he tells him that he was the partner with this other guy who stole stuff, blah blah blah. He leaves, and then the crooked caretaker is going to murder this guy for unknown reasons. He knocks someone out of the
That
hammer.
was like the most brain melting part of the movie, where I was like, I was so convinced the caretaker was a red herring.
Yes.
And he is ultimately.
Ultimately, yeah.
But it's so funny that the caretaker still just absolutely annihilates this funeral home director. And I went, are we ever going to find out why he does this, or like what this has any relation? It has literally nothing to do with the supernatural murderous doll portion of the movie. He just decides to kill this guy.
It is really funny to make your red herring an actual physical threat rather than just a red herring. That is kind of hilarious.
He's a red herring for the thing you're looking for, but he's still a murderer. Oh no, don't worry about that.
Yeah.
I do, but he knocks a dude on the head and he picks him up, and there's this really cool shot of the dude from, like, I guess you're from the killer's perspective. You see like this dude kind of floating in space for a hot minute. It's a really neat way to get this guy from one end to the other. Then he puts him in a casket, and that's his death. But it's a really neat kind of a visual flourish, where a much appreciated visual flourish, we'll call it.
Yeah, that was one of the more memorable
No, because by the time you get to this, like closer to like this final reel, you are just kind of being slapped upside the head by just the bizarreness of the movie. Like you are like by the time they're reintroducing the hitchhiker, who you already didn't understand his role when they first pick him up, and he's just being an asshole scaring them with like a fucking skeleton hand. And at a certain point, he just goes into the house. Only one person sees him go into the house, and there's a whole scene of them being like, there's no one in there. And she's like, I saw a guy go in there. There's no one in there. And he's like trying to like eat a box of croutons or something in there. And
he tries to, it's a French onion crouton from a fucking abandoned, dilapidated house. And he's got water bugs on him. I'm like, oh, ew. I'm like, yeah, dude, that's what happens.
So yeah, he's doing that. The caretaker is like actually killing people, despite the fact that he's the biggest red herring ever, and he still ultimately is. And the cops are arguing about whether they're going to deal with supernatural haunting, or whether it's like doing so would be like burning witches.
So many
Susan
movies.
is annoyed at Tina talking about the weird dude with the skeleton hand. She's like, it's almost the 20th century, Tina. You know, ghosts aren't real. Like, shut up, Tina. And then she gets fucking sliced in half. Susan is the one who I think is the one who washes her face in the sink and gets the other poltergeist ripoff moment with the blood pouring out of the sink. And I think this is really just where it turns into the closest you actually get to like maybe sort of like Fulci or Argento-esque, which is, you know, the caretaker at this point is like chasing Martha around in like this like obviously like day for night like graveyard where like a zombie hand is like beginning to pop up and attack her.
Turns into
There's like a spider.
Eventually.
Yep. There's a spider crawling in their general direction. I was briefly like, oh, dude, the Beyond trained me. I was like, is that spider going to like rip a face off? And it's like, nothing quite to that level, unfortunately. Mark is the one who sees the girl and the clown and then drowns in the pool of fucking milk and gets stabbed to death by Susan with the giant garden shears. And eventually just the sheer surrealness of what is taking place merged with the bizarre quality of how you even got here is enough that I was like, this is Italian greatness. Put Lenzi's name up there with the best of them. This is all you need. This is exactly what I expect of these men.
Logic
they all had a specific type of perverted brain damage, and I respect it in a way.
It's confounding in the best possible ways.
Yeah, it is essential for them to just kind of throw out most of the logic. You have to have about 10% just to keep it afloat, and then the rest of it just have a great time, and it just seems to make for at least an okay.
Oh yeah, the caretaker's the killer, but also it's the little girl or the little boy or it's the doll, and also there's a zombie with worms wielding a knife, and he's somehow related to all of this. And
it's my favorite thing.
It's fine,
but then it ends up being like with the giallo aspect, that robed zombie thing is physical and there, and so you're also kind of like, okay, so the doll was also the killer, but not really, because maybe the robe thing was controlling the doll. I'm so.
Or is it baffled. All the little boy who's like, you stole my fucking doll, you asshole? Like, what are you doing? But then they sort of end it by pouring gasoline into the little girl's tomb and just like lighting it on fire. And they're like, that's the end of that. The zombie disappeared. But don't worry. It's not over. The clown is still out there running people over with Boston buses.
Oh, that was awesome.
I
Oh my
love a
God.
movie that makes absolutely no sense. It ends in a way that seems somewhat satisfying or logically like, okay, burn the little girl, that's the end of it. And then someone has the audacity to be like, or is it? And I'm like, no, what or is what? I've not understood a second of this movie, and now you're or is-ing it me? No way, get out of here.
You're done. You
Yes,
are done.
exactly.
It was burned.
You did not earn an or is it, which is the end of the-
but then now you want to watch Witchery. You want to watch La Casa
let's see what
4.
happens
You
with
want to
this
see
doll.
you want to see what possibly David Hasselhoff could do in this milieu.
He's gonna take out every. He's just gonna take out every person in Boston with a bus. That's the sequel.
Yes,
Just
it's the
nonstop being sold from
Oh,
pawn
and
shop
not
to
only
pawn
that,
shop.
the sequel shot by the cinematographer of Demons and Demons 2.
Oh hell
So,
yeah! All right,
I'm watching
well, I
that this
kinda love
weekend.
that.
I think it's got to happen. It's
So,
well overdue.
I also just to comment on just how quickly they wrap it up too. As soon as they burn the body or the coffin or whatever, it's just like every single one, and they show it the way that
Yes.
it's edited. They just disappear, like they just cut it away in the same shot. So there's no like dissolve or melting or anything that is kind of physical. It's just like in camera and it's gone. All right, don't worry about it. We're moving on to Boston again. I found that to be very funny, just for how surreal all
Yes.
of the other aspects
Yes.
are, and then the ending is just nope, gone.
It's gone
out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
it has
it's
a Final
so strange.
Destination ending, and
Yes.
they're just
Yes.
You know what's so
It
funny?
does.
It has. Have you guys seen the remake of the American version of One Missed Call?
Oh no.
Have you?
I don't know if I have.
Okay, well, I'll just do it quickly. But it's the same death where literally this guy. The whole thing is like they hear voicemails and it's the last moments of their death, and the guy hears the voicemail where he is about to be hit by a bus, and then literally 5 seconds later, after he closes the phone, he just crosses the street and he says the same fucking line he just heard, and then gets hit by a bus, and it reminded me of this moment. So I just had to
oh
say
hell
it.
yeah, dude! Ray Wise is in this movie. Oh, okay, I'm looking into this.
Oh, dude, it's so bad, but there's some moments in it for sure. There's some glorious moments, but anyway.
Well, now you know it was referencing Ghost House, and they had taste.
Yeah, they had taste. Big,
Or was it?
Italian fans, big Lenzi fans?
Oh, that's right. That's
And
right.
it does
I
make
think
sense that,
he
he did Humphrey Humbert for this one. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Which as soon
Lenzi.
as
I
I
mean,
saw
he
it-
was kind of in his era with this, apparently.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Okay.
there was a lot of like other names being put on his movies because he was not particularly satisfied, I think, with the direction of his career.
The moment that I saw it, it was so funny. I think I even put it in my notes. I just went fake name, obviously,
Yes.
and I had no idea that it was Lenzi himself. So that was just really fun for me to read after.
Humphrey Humbert? How does that sound? Yeah.
Yeah, that's the guy who did the Poltergeist House by the Cemetery. I don't know, whatever, it's fine. It's fine.
That's such a funny fake name.
But yeah, do you know what? I will say, I feel like we have sounded quite negative on this
Sure,
movie.
yeah.
This did get a very light 3 from me, though. I did have a good time with it. I was actually a little surprised because throughout the movie, I was a little bit like, do I like this? I don't. And by the end of it, I was like, no, I think I do. And maybe I also want to explore a little bit more of Lenzi, and maybe I'll see his Polizio Tetskis where his heart is in it, and I'll come back to this and I'll be like, oh, dude, that is the movie of a man who's got one foot out the door already.
No
and
wonder
it's
you were
just
Humphrey
now,
this time. Yeah, exactly.
and I totally reserve the future possibility of that happening. But as a first experience with him, just engaging with exactly what it is and engaging with the knowledge of Italian horror, and especially really, really cheaply produced Italian horror, where they were like, we're going to make a buck by calling it Evil Dead 3. And we're going to shoot it in the same house that Lucio Fulci shot House by the Cemetery, because people already think that place is creepy looking. And we're going to turn in the cheapest, most hastily written, like 3-for-1 haunted house movie, cursed doll movie, and zombie movie, kind of like all in one. And we're not even going to spend enough time to really do any of them particularly well. We're just going to comically merge them together in really delirious and kind of humorous ways. And for me, got some good value out of that, and I don't know how much of it was was intentional. Some of it is some of it I think is, some of it is, you know, a little bit of just like low energy. We weren't sure what to do, and you know, he just said, yeah, that takes fine, you know, we got it, move on. Let's get to the scene where the fucking head's rolling around in the washing machine. But as it gets more into the, you know, Italian surreal horror qualities, the incomprehensibility and the bizarreness of the story actually did kind of help me a little bit, and it helped me engage with the movie, because I was like, you know what, the supernatural happenings of this are totally suitable to whatever the fuck these characters are talking about. And the movie does frequently come alive when all of a sudden the soundtrack gets to kick in, when the, you know, stage fright makeup artists get to have a little bit of fun, and when they get to like split the dad's head open with an axe, or they get to, you know, do a guillotine rocking horse fucking slice in half and do a cool little image like that. Again, my favorite one, the milk zombie who gets stabbed to death by his own girlfriend because he just kind of looks like a zombie and he's not a zombie. Like, that stuff is, I think, actually pretty genuinely good when you watch the sequences in the movie, and how it interacts with the bizarre nature of how it's been written, with things like the fucking caretaker being both a red herring and a literal murderer that has nothing to do with the rest of the movie. The way that the bumbling Boston cops, the way that you get the strange history that doesn't really make much sense, because a dad is just an asshole who stole a doll,
so
and you never find out what the actual vengeful spirit is, or exactly why it's angry. Or, I mean, it's just a guy sinned, he pulled a taboo, and like, that's just it. Every murder as a result of that. Again, I think anyone who watches this and is like, this is just completely inept, and they watch the dialogue or they watch the plot scenes and they're like, I don't get it. I totally understand that position. I had a reasonably fun time just kind of letting the weirdness wash over me of this one. And I think that's kind of the mindset you need to be in when you're watching an 80s Italian horror movie on Tubi. But I was in the perfect headspace for this movie. So it did fight its way to a pretty light 3 for me.
Yeah, I was fighting it myself. I didn't rate it on purposely before this conversation, because I had to watch this one by myself, and it was just kind of like in my room, throw it on Tubi. All right, let's do this. And I do feel like it would have been better with
Jamie would be foring this if he watched it with his mom.
Yeah, like if I watched this with my mom or brothers, I feel like I would have taken to the humorous aspects, and also just how illogical it is. Like, it is nonsense at the end of the day, a lot of this stuff. So I think that would have been easier to just laugh with or laugh at, whatever way you want to put it, with an audience. So I think this, like you said, Steve, it's kind of like you watch Return of the Living Dead, you know, you get prepped, you actually watch a film, and then this one is after you've had a couple beers and you're enjoying it, and you're making jokes, you're talking over it. I think that's what this is more built for, and so I would call it kind of an audience movie. And in that perspective, after talking to you guys, there is a lot of stuff here that I know I would have laughed a little bit more and engaged with a little bit on a more positive note if I was with people. And I think like these movies are so built for that. So it is like a total mess of Italianisms, you know, which I think is a good time. But it as messy as it is, it does have those moments of like good gore. It's rare, but it happens. And because of all of the hangout time, like I said earlier, those moments do really jump out at you. And because the makeup is great and they are taking their time to film those sequences with a little bit more passion, they are visceral and they do feel impactful, even though they are quite rare. The milk pit, I agree, I think is probably the most impactful just because it's so surreal. And that one is, a lot of this is kind of detached from any logic, but that moment is so detached from anything that they've set up in the film that I was just completely floored by it, and I had no idea that was coming. So
they should have brought the dog back in that scene too.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, just him trying to lick up the milk or something like that.
he just like the guy like barely gets out, and like the dog like pushes him back in.
Yeah, just like a little tackle. Yeah, that'd be so funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's like it has this. There's an irony in how it is funny, but but because of the lack of logic, there's a lot of nonsense, but you can just kind of attach yourself to the humor of it. And it's hard to say what is intentional and what isn't. But again, I think I did have a good time. So I think I'm going to give it a light 3. I'm still almost wrestling with it in a way. But there's a lot of moments in here that are just so bizarre that I end up having a good time. So yeah.
Look, I watched it on October 1st, and the rule about watching something on October 1st is that it's 3 stars no matter how cheap and incomprehensible it is.
Yeah,
That's just how it works.
Spooktober, baby.
That's how it works around here. So this is, we're trying to justify it, but it's the rules.
Yeah.
There's some Spooktober rules to follow, and that's one of them.
Yeah.
I think it's a legit 3 for me because I kind of love this kind of dumb shit. It is dumb shit. I mean, I would never intellectually.
You're also humming and hawing the whole way. Steven's like, "Fuck you guys. This is just straight up. It's a good movie.
It's a good
Stop
little stupid
fucking-"
movie. I think the score actually rips. Again, I think it's on Spotify. You can enjoy it yourself. Skip the track of the lullaby. I think there might even be 2 tracks because there might have been
How long
a modification.
is that track?
Great question.
So like 2.5 minutes of the same fucking 5 seconds.
The only version of this soundtrack I would buy is authentic is one where the lullaby is every other song. In between every song, they just put it back in.
That would be authentic to the film we just watched. Yes.
Yeah.
But it's got all the hallmarks of a cheesy 80s horror movie that I'm looking for. Again, like I if I want to watch like Hellraiser and like really enjoy myself and intellectualize, I'll absolutely do that. But sometimes I just want to watch a bunch of dead meats get dead meated, and there's some pretty good dead meating here.
Oh yeah.
So it's entertaining enough. There is too much hangout time for sure. The drippy slow bits do start to creep up on you, but then you get the insane dialogue. You're like, you know what? I'm back in. We're yelling about the Salem witch trials. Fantastic. So it's a light. It's a solid 3 for me. It's a recommend. Again, don't watch this alone. This is not something to watch. Soberly to understand Italian horror. This is something to watch with buddies with drinks and people yelling and throwing popcorn at the screen at the badness. That's where I'm at.
All right. Well, I think that is going to wrap it up for Ghost House and for this week's episode. That was once again Return of the Living Dead from 1985 and Ghost House from 1988. Thanks so much, Stephen, for joining us and for inflicting these films on us and all of our listeners. This is the part of the show where usually if you've got anything that you guys are doing over at We Hate Movies, we want to hear about it. Here, you guys plug it. You guys got some live shows coming up, I feel like, right?
We got a bunch of different live stuff coming up. We're going to do a virtual live show on Scream 4 to fit in with our 4 horror movie month. That's one of those fun hangout shows we do from our homes, and it's a kind of a fun virtual live experience. Those tickets are going to be fun. That gets to replay for 2 weeks after we do it. So if you can't be there on October 23rd at 9 p.m. Eastern, you can still catch it for 2 more weeks after that. And then live, we're going to be in Seattle, Washington on October 15th. And talking about Harry and the Hendersons, which is going to be really exciting. And then we're also going to be in Portland, Oregon on October 7th, on November 17th. Did I say October? On November 17th, talking about the Goonies in Portland. And then on December 4th, we'll be in Boston, Massachusetts, talking about Pretty Woman. All that's at whmpodcast.com/tour.
Wow.
So if you're available.
You guys are going to Boston and it's not a Ghost House episode.
That's we fucked up is the idea. I hadn't watched this movie in a while and I forgot it's such an iconic Boston film.
Yeah. Like any Celtics fans in here?
Everyone from Boston knows.
Check out
Ghost
this creepy
House,
ass
baby.
doll.
Yes, exactly. There's a big statue of the clown, much like the statue of Rocky in Philly. In Boston.
Yeah.
But we're really whmpodcast.com/tour. Check all that stuff out. Thank you guys so much for having me. I love you guys. This is so much fun.
Oh, hell yeah, man.
No, thanks for coming on, man. Definitely check all of their stuff out. Check out the show, too, if you guys aren't. I'm assuming we have a lot of people that are, but if just so happen to be, I've guested a couple times, go check them out. They're fun.
Absolutely.
For our listeners, in 1 week's time, we're going to be back over on the Patreon feed where we're going to be doing our 350th episode, which we decided needed to be a big one for you guys. So we got Return of the Living Dead out this week. Next week, we're going to get another big heavy hitter some of you have been asking for. We're going to finally talk about Fright Night.
Oh, yeah.
Which I'm excited to finally get that one on, because I actually, another one that I only watched for the first time in the last couple of years, and I liked it a little bit more than I kind of expected to, which is not to say that I guess undervalued or didn't expect, but it had a little bit of a different reputation. It was a little bit weirder and darker than I had imagined for out of the comedy aspect. And then we're going to be pairing it with The Lost Boys. So we're going to go double 80s vampire mode for you over on the Patreon next week. And then in 2 weeks' time, we're going to be back with a special guest where we're going to be switching it up. And we are going to be going 90s teen sci-fi horror mode. We're going to be talking about Robert Rodriguez's The Faculty.
Oh, hell
and
yeah.
we're going to be pairing it with Disturbing Behavior, which is one that Jamie and I actually, I think, did on a whim as one of our virtual watches, and we kind of were surprised at how much we enjoyed it. And I didn't realize before we threw it on that it was like basically most of the team of the first season of the X-Files making like a Body Snatchers movie, but in like a high school. And I was like, it's actually quite fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I forgot we covered that one on one of our live watches. That's awesome.
Yeah, so that's what we're going to be talking about in 2 weeks' time with a special guest. So look forward to that. And then we'll have one more big episode of Spooktober later, but we will announce that later. So that is going to be it for everything on this week's episode. Thanks so much for listening, and keep it sleazy.
Keep it sleazy, everybody.